Ah, the vast galaxy and universe of RimWorld, so beautiful, so chaotic. Long, long ago, there was a governing empire over the entire galaxy that kept things in line, the Empire, you could call it, but due to internal turmoil and other matters, they became shattered. Empires tend to be a delicate thing, but one glorious emperor plans on putting things back on the right track. And that is why today, my friends, we, along with the emperor and his entourage of his clones, shall be taking back the galaxy one planet at a time. Luckily, we've recently commandeered a pirate vessel that is quite small, and that's good because I like a challenge. It'll be a lot harder taking over the planet with such a small ship to fight with. The planet in question today is indeed habitable and also contains the remnants of the Shattered Empire, or at least one of the branches of the Shattered Empire. You may notice, however, that it also contains several other factions, such as the organization known as Void, our arch nemesis. The UNSC and the Covenant are also here, though we don't exactly care about them and their territory as long as they don't get in our way, and we also have several other pirate factions that are warring for territory as well. Now, to take over this planet, though, we're going to need an army, and the majority of my army as the Emperor is off trying to help me conquer other planets, so I believe I'll be using the Biotech 1.5 cloning mod to go about cloning my current entourage and turning them into an army. The idea here is to turn this desolate pod of a satellite that we've built into a proper space station by some point, but you may also notice that we are in desperate need of resources. And there's only one way, or perhaps our favorite way, to go about gathering resources, if you could call it that. So we're going to be undocking the ship and heading down to the planet's surface. Now, even though our makeshift satellite space station doesn't have any resources aboard, the pirate ship does have some pretty basic ones, being plasteel, steel components, yada yada yada. We're going to be using these resources to build some small engines on both sides of this little vessel, as this vessel itself is actually not meant for entering a planet's atmosphere, and thus we need some proper propulsion to keep us from crashing. Once completed, we began to make our very slow descent towards the planet's surface, landing not too far from an outpost chock full of pirates. These are the pirates known as the Torturous Marauders, a newly founded faction, from what I can tell, that seems to be infesting planets throughout the galaxy like lice. You'll notice that they don't seem to be hostile towards us, and if they were intelligent, this would be because they realize their emperor is here and it's time for them to bow down. But unfortunately, it seems that they are blissfully ignorant to the hierarchy of the heavens, and it's more or less because we are actually traveling in a stolen ship of theirs. But if there's one thing that we hate plaguing our galaxy just as much as the organization, it's pirates. As we approach their camp, at first we could see the confusion in their eyes, which would quickly turn to fear. We began completely unloading our blasters into the pirates, slaughtering droves of them at a time. They had absolutely zero chance of survival or even escape for that matter, as we began chasing down those few members who would flee. Poor dumb cowards. Truth be told, they probably would have been willing to bend the knee to their new emperor, but we have to set an example. Besides, they definitely wouldn't have liked it when we began tearing their outpost completely apart and stripping it of its resources. Not only would we take the steel, plasteel, all the blocks we could carry, and everything else of course, but we would also end up harvesting their devil strand, which appears to be the primary productive resource of this outpost itself. Besides, even when filthy pirates bend the knee to authority, it's never that way for long, normally until you turn your back. Utilizing some of the resources that we had taken, we would actually begin making some very large shelves, the largest that we could muster. That way we could fit all these resources inside the ship. We also quickly began lobbing down down many a tree or vegetation in the area for their precious wood. Reason being is because we would also end up creating a small biofuel refinery to turn all of this wood into chemfuel. That way we could actually power the engines of the ship. This is a prime example of how utilizing the technological prowess and knowledge of the Empire and its peoples, we are able to create a self-sustaining empire and fighting force. By this point, the ship was fully stocked with many of the resources we'd collected and was looking more like a cargo vessel, thankfully. After topping off the engines with chemfuel one last time, we then began to take off to go and dock with our satellite in orbit once more. But first, a word from me. Spring has finally sprung. The beautiful birds are buzzing and the bees are chirping. And it's finally time for you, yes, you, to take off that disgusting sweatshirt you've worn all winter. Ugh, good lord, you really need to wash this thing. I introduce to you the all-new Rat Daddy t-shirt. This stylish, comfortable, new and improved design is made by our friend Han over at goodsbyhan.com, who, quite frankly, is nothing short of a creative genius and an absolute blast to work with, so you should hit her up for any of your artwork needs. And you should also head over to ratnightapparel.com to get yourself one of these fashionable, chic t-shirts, with a design inspired by the late, great Andy Warhol. These aren't only for the men, though, as we got them for the ladies as well. So what are you waiting for? Your new favorite t-shirt awaits. First things first, now that we have the allotted resources, we began putting in some power generation in the form of solar panels on the satellite, that way it can be somewhat self-sustaining. We then quickly began to relocate all the very large shelves we had built inside our little commandeered pirate vessel, and we would actually put those inside the satellite for safekeeping as well as storage purposes. But our reign of terror against the torturous marauders was just beginning. We began to take the ship down once more to yet another of their pitiful little outposts. We quickly enveloped them in a swarm and Hail Mary of blaster fire. To tell you that they stood absolutely no chance against us was a gargantuan understatement. There would be no survivors, we'd make sure of that. The only thing that would be surviving from this base is all of its beautiful, precious resources, which we would quickly deconstruct and take into our ship, of course. However, it was during this time that the Emperor thought to himself, perhaps he should have a change of attire. It's been so long since he's had a proper helm or mask. This particular design and helm requires a very vital part from one of the pirates, their skull. True respect from these pirates is only going to come if they fear us. And what better way to make them do that than by wearing one of their skulls on the front of our helmet? Ah, yes, I think this will intimidate the unwashed masses of pirates quite well, striking fear into the hearts of all those who oppose us and even our most obedient subjects. The Empire is back. And with the new Empire come a few new weapons, or at least new to you if you're new to the Clone Army series. For you see, my friends, the Clone Army is all too familiar with nuclear power, you could say. I'm talking bombs, baby, real destructive ones too. Using these pathetic, pitiful sensors on the pirate vessel that we commandeered, we're actually able to observe certain areas, such as a nearby void fortress. Just the type of place that would have plenty of resources, and I do indeed mean plenty, many more types of resources, as well as the quantity of resources than any of the pirates, or quite frankly any other faction on this planet or even in the galaxy. But I think you get the point. Enough of my rambling. We began preparing our gigantic nuclear warheads, and then bombs away. Oh, it's been far too long since we've bombed these bastards into oblivion. My favorite part about bombing a void fortress or laboratory is that if you hit their power cells, you cause quite the chain reaction. After that, and the whole damn place is up in smoke, you really only have to worry about all their defenses, which can be quite troublesome unless you know how to take them on. Lucky for us, we're quite familiar with it by this point. Ah, there we are, just what we needed. Now, this being a fortress instead of a laboratory, they don't have all that many construction materials or really any resources compared to that of a laboratory, but I have something in mind there as well. Instead of worrying about what they currently have on their shelves, we're going to be deconstructing this entire damn fortress and stripping it of its resources such as steel and plasteel. And when I say the entire damn place, you had better believe that I mean it. We are going to take every last nook and cranny that we can fit aboard that pirate vessel, filling it to the absolute brim as much as we can stuff. And sure, we were occasionally having some issues with their mutants that were waking up from hibernation, whatever these monstrosities they create are, but it was well worth it as we were getting plenty of resources and even better, many of the void power cells. Even with all of our vast knowledge in the Empire, we still don't know how to create these, and thus they are very valuable to us. After taking all the resources that we could possibly fit into the ship, we were being chased by many more of these mutants who were waking up from hibernation, one of which so fast, even making her way into the ship, where she would promptly meet her death, of course. But with that, it is time for us to return to our little paradise in the stars that we're building. Thankfully, these void power cells would be able to get us back up to dock with the station. We had increased the size of the pirate vessel, and due to all the new weight that it was carrying, this type of power generation was absolutely crucial for making it back out of the atmosphere. Once we had docked with our little makeshift satellite station and back in orbit around the planet, the real work could begin. All those resources that we had stolen from Void, and even what we had left from the pirates, of course, we immediately began using to expand our station into, well, a true station. We also immediately began building some very necessary rooms in the station. First and foremost, you would think with a space station, you're probably going to prioritize things like hydroponics, or possibly even just a bedroom for all of your people, or something like that. Well, not in this case. No, my friends, we are prioritizing a laboratory. To be specific, this is a cloning facility, a laboratory where we are going to be extracting DNA from our clones and possibly even our Emperor to make, well, clones. You see, it'll be a lot easier to dominate this planet and to take more resources from our enemies once we have an entire army to do so with. Of course, though, we do need some proper protection for our cloning space station above the planet, so we built an extra large shield generator to engulf the entire thing to protect us from any attacks. Not only should this protect us from enemy ships, but it also will protect us from any enemy drop pods, i.e. Void, the organization that loves to throw its soldiers right through your roof. To begin, the Emperor himself, Napoleon, would actually extract his own embryo DNA for our very first clones. Not to worry though, this little clone shouldn't be able to overpower him or anything, as he is only providing a mere fraction of his DNA, just in case. I'm not even sure that these machines could birth a creature of his stature and might. I then realized that we need many more of these embryo DNA taking machines, and thus we built a whole smorgasbord of them and had our clones begin chipping in some of their own DNA. Once again, simply a fraction for the time being, meaning that these clones aren't exactly going to be on par with all of us. But in a case like this, for this type of planet, we're going for more of quantity over quality. Now, of course, we're not going to have a bunch of shitty soldiers, but, you know, decent clones. You'll see what I'm saying. We also began working on the station's defensive capabilities by building some very large plasma cannons on both sides of it. we needed to be able to protect itself in the event that we're on the planet slaughtering some pirates or Void associates and having just a jolly good time, and we're not around to protect it manually. Just the same, we would also need to ensure that it could fuel itself if we were to take the pirate vessel back down to the planet's surface, and I don't think our solar panels are going to cut it once it's at a certain size, so we added in 2 large fission reactors as well. With all the uranium we've already taken from Void, we should be able to keep the station powered for quite some time. I told you we were quite familiar with nuclear power after all. Next up, we needed a proper storage room, one that would actually be large enough to store all the materials that we need, not only to continue building onto the station, but we're also going to need a lot of nutritious foods and or just some basic nutritious items such as rice, nutrient paste, whatever we can find realistically to feed all of our growing baby clones. After plenty of time building and hauling things in, with the current size of the station as it is, I was fairly pleased. And now it was time for us to move on to extracting more DNA from the Emperor as well as our little elite clone entourage here and making many more embryos. We would also add in a very large machining table as well as a fabrication bench into our warehouse. Not only would we be able to make more nuclear bombs here, but also some attire. Expending quite a few resources, we would also build ourselves a Razor Crest style ship for the Emperor himself, just temporarily until we can build something quite a bit larger, of course. Though it seems that our work was completed just in time, as we now have a hostile enemy fleet approaching. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be 2 relatively small-looking ships, hardly what I would consider a fleet if I'm being honest with you. The unknown attackers began firing off missiles at us, hitting our piss-poor little barely protected pirate ship, though we don't really mind all that much. We would take off in the Emperor's Razor Crest and land not too far behind this enemy fleet. As you can see, our plasma cannons have already done quite a number on their engines. As we began to board, a soldier in a beautiful dawning white armor came out. Ah yes, the Shattered Empire. It would seem that our station is large enough for them to detect now, and they've decided to try to attack us, of all people, even with the organization infesting their planet. Poor little creature. Not to worry, little friend, Daddy's home, and so is the new Empire. As to be expected, with most of the branches of the Shattered Empire, they're not exactly eager to see us, or even to join us just yet. Well, at the very least, we'll take their ships for our own fleet. And since they want to become traitors to the new Empire and their new Emperor, they can become ashes. We have no room for cowards here anyhow. Only the bravest of Imperials and our clones, of course. With that battle completed though, and these new ships in our midst, we would of course use the salvage bays of the station and bring them a little bit closer. That way we could deconstruct them much easier. Now initially I thought of keeping these for our clones to use, but I think the materials would be much better to have instead, and that'll keep us in the stars here working on the station just a little bit longer before we have to go raid another fortress. And as you can see, I feel that this was a pretty good decision, as our warehouse room here is basically filled to the brim with plasteel and steel, though we do still have plenty of empty shelves and room for more. All the while, we're working on our station. Many of the factions on the planet, such as the Covenant, are already easily losing ground to the organization. This is why the Covenant in our quadrant of the galaxy had already surrendered to them. Looks like this one shall do the same. Now, of course, we would happily help the residents of this planet fight against the organization and trade out their dictator-to-be with a brand new dictator, i.e. us, but first we need many more clones, and they're still currently taking forever to grow. In the meantime, however, while our army is growing, I suppose the very least we could do is prepare for their arrival with a brand new armory room, as well as the armor that they're going to be wearing into battle against all of our foes. Hopefully, we'll have enough for all of them by the time they're grown out of their little test tubes. I also wanted to make some engines for the station if for some reason we need to adjust our orbit a little bit or make some type of emergency retreat. It would be better for us to swallow our pride for a hot moment instead of losing all of our clones. These antimatter engines should be perfect for that, but there is just one problem. The special type of fuel that they require is not something that we're capable of creating just yet, and thus we'll need to acquire it from different means. As we were planning on how to go about doing so, we were also adding in a few extra weapons to the station, when all of a sudden, our very first batch of clones were finally born. Welcome to the world, my little warriors, my little killers-to-be, my oppressors of the stars. Now, unfortunately, these babies did come out as, well, babies, so we would have to throw them back into the growth vats to try and accelerate their growth a little bit more so they can actually carry some blasters and wear the armor and, fight. So that's exactly what we began doing. But as they were still growing, we planned out and also began on some pretty ambitious expansion projects to the station, but as we were doing so, we started to run a little low on resources, and even worse, we had more babies. A god-awful amount of babies. I'm not really sure how this happened, as I thought that there would only be one or so per growth vat, but it seems that our army has come pretty early. There were so many babies lying in a pile on the floor, I couldn't count them all, quite frankly, so we would have to use up the last of our steel resources to go about building some emergency cribs all over the station, even in our engine bay. Quite frankly, I don't even know how we're going to feed them all, but we'll figure something out. In the meantime, we had also used up the last reserves of our steel on those cribs, and because I didn't want to leave the babies up here by themselves, we actually decided a bit of an executive decision. We actually started deconstructing the commandeered pirate vessel that we've been using this entire video, and we're going to strip it down to all of its necessary resources to continue expanding the station. Not to worry though, the pirate crew is still safe and sound, sleeping away in their cryo-sleep caskets. Perhaps one day we'll decide to wake them up, but for now they're safe. Kind of, they're floating around in space, but, Utilizing the pirate vessel, though, we began making ourselves some very large coolant tanks to ensure that our shield could take quite a beating. But not only that, we would also end up using the last few bits of steel to make ourselves some more large nuclear warheads. Yes, you caught me, we're going to be bombing Void once more. In case you couldn't tell, the Razor Crest just so happens to have a bombing capability, and I know just the Void Fortress that is just begging to be nuked into ashes. Tally-ho, lads. Ah, such a beautiful light show, eh? It looks like they're not quite happy about that, though. The Emperor, all on his own with a blaster rifle, would take on the Void Forces, or at least, what remained of them by this point. Ah, I must say, truly astonishing to see him in action, no? Well, with the entire fortress conquered and all of its inhabitants killed, it was time for us to begin making a few runs back and forth, bringing resources back to the station. By the time that we had finally made our final run, our army was complete and completely grown up. Well, technically they're only about 13 or 14 years old, but that does mean that they are old enough to fire a blaster, and also that they can fit into their armor. I decided to go with a more classic looking armor for them, reminiscent of some of our old armies from the beginning of the clone army's creation. With the creation of our empire, I just thought it was nostalgic, and and also just because we're creating these less than average troops. Not to worry though, this armor will still protect them quite well against any of the ballistic weapons that Void uses, and of course we'll also be providing them with some blasters that I think we'll start working on right now. But not only would we begin working on some blasters for all of our new clone soldiers, we would also end up working on some new wings of the space station itself, all of this simultaneously, which was quite easy to do since we now have an actual army at our disposal who not only can fight, but of course can also construct as well. Now, as mentioned previously and earlier on, these new soldiers are not exactly up to par in the gene department, especially not compared to the Emperor, and definitely not compared to even our elite clone soldiers that he has with him, and thus because of this, we are going to be providing them with plenty of implants and void bionics to make them super soldiers. This would indeed take a very tedious amount of time, but once completed, we had a true fighting force under our thumb once more, ready to take on the world and all of those who lay claim to it other than ourselves. The only issue that we're currently facing is how are we going to get them back down to the planet's surface? Well, in the past, we have dabbled a bit with some droids and different types of robotics, and those types of droids used a certain type of dropship that we would actually end up building 3 of, as I felt that they had quite the adequate carrying capacity for our troops. Think of this like a test mission to see if everything's going to go alright when we attack a void laboratory. And yes, indeed, you did hear me correctly, this is not a void fortress, but a laboratory, meaning that they have many more resources, but also it is going to be much more dangerous. Most notably, in the middle of the laboratory, they seem to have a large shield generator that could easily encompass the entire property, meaning that nuclear weapons will no longer work when they have one of these bad boys. Lucky for us, we don't plan on relying on nukes anymore, only using about 2/3 of our current army and our current troops. We began moving on the laboratory, destroying their defenses quite easily. With those silly, pathetic little contraptions out of the way, we began making our way to the center, the residential area of the Void Associates. They, unlike their mechanical defenses, actually put up one hell of a fight and were somewhat more durable, I'll say, but they too would fall to our might. With the vast majority of the associates killed, it was time for us to make a true infiltration of the laboratory where they keep all of their succulent resources. Not only would we find plenty of materials to build with, like plasteel, steel, yada yada yada, all that great stuff, as well as gold and whatever else, but we also found plenty of void bionics and implants, more than enough to finish off the rest of our army, and also to go ahead and give to many of our soldiers who have bionics but are missing a few implants and what have you. The hardest part of the entire ordeal, you might think, was killing all the associates, but you would be severely mistaken. No, my friends, the hardest part was after getting this back to the station, we had to take some time to haul it all in. It would seem that the organization of this planet is also becoming quite a cakewalk so far. We'll need to be careful though. We've thought that about them before, and they've proven us wrong time and time again. The organization is a very credible threat, and of course, our biggest deterrence when taking planets. They'll come up with something to stop us. They always do. And yes, invading these laboratories and these fortresses is great for getting resources, but if they're fully aware that we are on this planet now, they are most definitely going to be making efforts to ensure that we don't get those resources even if we take their bases, so we need another plan. Luckily, it seems anywhere in this galaxy, it doesn't matter the planet, silver talks, baby, so we'll actually be able to hire some fine folks to join the Empire and to go far north into the mountains to set up a little bit of a mining operation for us. It's not much now, just to start, simply a foothold of our Empire on this planet, but we will be able to set up many quarries and different types of mines. That way we can request the resources that they're digging out or sell them off for profit, whatever we're feeling at the time, or whatever the situation calls for best. This will also help us eliminate the need for invading other factions like Void solely for resources. But now that we finally got our foot in the door here, and now that we finally also finished off the bare necessities of our cloning space station in orbit around the planet, there is one more thing we need to do. This space station needs an AI to run things in our absence to the utmost efficiency. Technically, we could end up using a computer core with a computer-based AI, but I have something else in mind. Allow me to introduce RimWorld, the station's brand new AI. And in case you're new around here, it's important that you know that RimWorld isn't just your average AI. He's actually a fallen companion, a fallen warrior, and ex-enemy. He sacrificed himself in an explosion a little while ago, and we decided to keep his brain and whatever bits and bobs of him we could for his DNA for this exact moment. I could think of no one better to run this station to its utmost efficiency, and hopefully, maybe in the future, we could regenerate his body. But only time will tell. Welcome back, old friend. Now that we truly have all of our ducks in a row and our main priorities taken care of, such as our laboratories to make our army and to replace our army when many of our soldiers die inevitably, I also felt it was probably time for us to focus on a hydroponics area. That way we can begin feeding our army in the event that we do not get any more resources from places like Void and what we talked about earlier, essentially. And of course, sticking with that, we would also build a very small room where we could begin making our very own nutrient-paced meals. Luckily, there's so many implants and joy wires in their brains, these clones, they'll never even notice that it tastes like ass. And if they do, we could always strip them of all of their armor and then throw their ass out the airlock. Just because they're tough as nails now doesn't mean they still can't be suffocated, of course. But our station still requires many more expansions. One in the northern section of the station itself is going to be something of a mechanoid laboratory, if you will. Now, of course, we don't plan on creating a mechanoid or droid army as we have our wonderful clones, but we still find that androids and mechanoids are quite useful in certain situations, and that's why we're going to be linking it to RimWorld himself, the AI of the ship, so that we may go about creating a few. For our very first mechanoid, we would end up gestating a very large specific type, which just so happens to be a surrogate. And though yes, this type of mechanoid does indeed have defensive capabilities, being in the form of a slug thrower shotgun in place of one of its arms, it's actually not used for defensive purposes. Well, at least not in the traditional idea of defense. This surrogate mechanoid is not going to be defending our station per se, but more of all of our clone babies that we're raising. Not only that, but she is also programmed to nurture them, and she is pretty darn good at it, as you can imagine. Currently, she does need a little bit of help from our soldiers, but eventually, after getting enough of these mechanoids, it will become clockwork. Now then, to further ensure the security of our mission around this planet, as well as in the galaxy, and the security of our station and all its resources, we are also going to be building a comms console with 2 of the orbital trade beacons in our warehouse. Having this option available to us does also mean that we'll be able to contact the orbital traders hub, meaning that if for some reason we can't get our resources from the planet for one reason or another, maybe our mines get destroyed by the organization or whatever, we'll actually be able to purchase those resources to continue our glorious mission. We also have plenty of forms of power generation like the void power cells as well as our fission reactors, but we don't have anywhere really to go about storing it all, so we made some very large capacitors as well as a few smaller ones just for the time being. We would also continue furthering our expansion of the station once more just above the residential area of all of our clone soldiers, trying to stick with a symmetrical design as much as humanly possible here, as you can see. On the left side, we would end up building ourselves some shuttle bays. Now, of course, our ships are far too large to go about actually using these bays, these, but they will be absolutely perfect if we decide to put in some emergency escape pods, or even when trading, we'll be able to get our goods in this area. On the right wing, we just kind of made a miscellaneous area where we can actually go about making some chem fuel with a biofuel refinery, a few other science and military stations if the need be, and then also just kind of a large fission reactor, just a little bit of everything that I felt the station needed at the time. We may end up changing this around at some point, but something that I built that I had almost forgot to actually go about creating was a solar flare shield generator. This will actually prevent Void and any other faction that uses that method of shutting down all of our electronics and power generation from being able to do so. Now, truth be told, the organization of Void has been known to find ways around these to shut everything down still, but it is a good precaution to take. Last but not least, we would actually end up deconstructing our Razor Crest for the Emperor, as well as all the droid dropships that we had previously built. Now, I know that that may seem a little drastic, extreme, and even a bit odd as to why I would do that, but we were more of testing out these designs, and truth be told, nothing is quite as good as the old classic. Ah yes, the LAAT dropships, absolute perfection. Nothing beats the old Model A. With these, we'll be able to take our army back down to the planet's surface with ease, every last single soldier, and begin our true war against the organization and anyone else who stands in our way. But that will be next episode. Until then, my friends. Howdy, friendos. Welcome back aboard the well, we haven't named this cloning station just yet, but as soon as we do, I'll let you know. At the moment, the Emperor was just catching wart up on everything that he's missed in the last few years. Meanwhile, our clone army, fresh as a bug snug in a rug or something like that, is, trying to make some nutrient-paced meals and just kind of wandering aimlessly. Seems like there could be something they could spend their time doing, you would think. Ah, that's it, more construction. I think we'll add on to the station once more, this time just off of our mechanoid laboratory. This shall be our training bay. Now, of course, we're not going to be using any live weapons in here, mostly because we could blast through a hole in the wall and then suck all the baby clones out and kill them, and it'd be a whole ordeal. So instead, I think we'll build some holodecks. You can think of a holodeck kind of like a virtual reality simulator, but without the headset, that will put our clones in a variety of different types of situations that will have them well prepared for any manner of threats. As you can see, we even have a simulation for bionics and limbs and resources like gold. That way, when they're in the warehouse of a Void laboratory or fortress, they'll know exactly what to grab. Ah yes, speaking of which, it's time that we pay yet another visit to our old friends, the organization, as we have our full army strength behind us, including the Emperor himself. And with our 4 brand new troop-carrying gunships, this should be easy as pie, baby. For the organization is a cancer, a tumor upon every single planetary body that they touch, and just anything they touch in general, to be honest with you. And thus we must cleanse this place of them. Let us begin, shall we? On this rainy jungle night, their defenses would stand absolutely no chance against us, and neither would their associates. The Emperor and his army were taking some pretty heavy damage here and there, but thanks to our bionics and implants that matched that of Void, we would heal right up from it quite quickly. So destroying their defending force and destroying their base as a whole was a bit of a non-issue, you could say. But I will admit the cheeky little buggers were a bit smarter than we had given them credit for, so they had sent some soldiers to sneak around us and start attacking our ships, which would have left us stranded here, if they would have succeeded, that is. Our ships were left with some pretty major damage, but not to worry, as we had plenty of resources from the Void base that we had just taken over to go about repairing them. What we had left over, and what we could actually fit into our ships, we began bringing all the way back to our cloning cloning station. We'll just stuff it on the shelves with the rest of the resources that we've taken from them. Most of it, like steel, components, plasteel, we're going to use to improve the station and to further expand it a bit here and there, but things like uranium we'll end up using as fuel to continue powering the station for a very long time. Something else that we could do, though, is trade off some of the resources and items like the void tech implants and bionics that we're using for our soldiers to some exotic goods traders who are dying to get their hands on them, essentially. Now you might be asking yourself as to why we would be doing this. Well, we just have so darn many of them, and we do need to get a really big stockpile of silver if we're going to be taking over this planet with an empire. This isn't exactly a big stockpile, but it is a drop in the bucket, and of course we also ended up purchasing just a few exotic particles to see if these will work in our engines. If so, we may end up buying some more. And yes, indeed, it would seem these are exactly what we needed. This will help us be mobile during any space combat, which I'm sure there will be plenty of. Also worth mentioning, as we're hauling all of these items in and doing a bit of trading with exotic goods traders, we also have a fresh batch of clones growing. But of course, the growth cycle of our little embryos is going to take some time, so in the meantime, we are going to be expanding our station furthermore just above the cloning area and just next to our training area. At some point, the Emperor is going to have to leave this station and some clones who inhabit it, as well as some droids who take care of all the clones who are growing all by themselves. And when he does, he needs to be able to ensure that they can and will be defending themselves. And to do so, of course, they're going to need the appropriate amount of weapons as well as coolant takes to cool off those weapons and the shields protecting the station. So, long story short, we're just going to build a shit ton of lasers, railguns, and plasma cannons. Oh, and we're also going to be building some large advanced batteries, as they're actually double what the small ship capacitors can hold in terms of charge. But then after that, something much more important to the defense of the station that we're going to be working on is the shell, the hull of the station itself, and we are actually going to be utilizing the resources that we currently have and that we had taken from Void recently to double up on the hull. Not only around our important bips and bobs, such as all of our weapons, our cooling stations, our engines, but also of course in places like our fusion reactors, which are very important as well. And speaking of which, with all of these new weapons and all of these new electronics on board of the station itself, we need a new way to create power. So, my friends, I introduce to you an advanced nuclear power generator right in the tip of the station. I know, why am I not building fusion reactors? Well, I can tell you that this advanced nuclear generator is going to be much better than the fusion reactors, even in their overdrive states, even though it does require quite a few coolers to keep it, well, cooled off so that it doesn't overpower and overheat the station and eventually blow up. For a quick comparison, the ship fission reactor actually produces 10,000 power, while the advanced nuclear generator produces 26,000 power. The 10 from the fission reactor is also when it's at its max overdrive, which can also be quite dangerous, so this one is actually even more safe than that. You know, as long as we keep the room temperature below freezing, of course. And with that, my friends, we have a very self-sufficient and very well-defended station to grow all of our little baby clones for our army of the planet. Speaking of which, it would seem that our new batch of our clones is finally finished, and while some of them would actually just go ahead and join the ranks of our normal army with the other faceless, nameless soldiers that we created last episode, a few of the others were special. Well, not really, to be honest with you, but the idea here is that we are going to make them special by giving them some experimental implants and other procedures. There are some void technologies and implants that are so powerful beyond human comprehension and so rare that we can't just be giving them out willy-nilly. No, we need to be using them for special squads, if you will. And so that is exactly what we have created created here a special squad of clone soldiers who will be doing some very special missions. Now, I don't currently have a name for any of them or even this squad, so if you would like to provide one or both, feel free to do so in the comments section down below. Also, a massive thank you to our friend Trapjaw Gaming 047 for the recommendation of a commando squad of clones. Not exactly sure these are commandos just yet, but we'll see what we can do. We are also going to be building them their own Razor Crest, that way they can use it for missions without getting in the way of the day-to-day operations of the entire army. Now, of course, this program is still in its infancy, so you'll have to bear with me. Speaking of which, we do have a trade ship, well, technically a pirate ship of Kigyar. It would seem that they've stolen a trade ship. Stomping out some pirates could be the perfect opportunity for our little commando squad here to get a taste of actual battle, and also a good chance for some education and experience of battle itself, of course. Not to worry, as they're basically indestructible when compared to a few skinny, frail Kigyar. Now, since it is their first mission, we'll help them out a little bit. We're going to use the station's defenses to attack the shields of the Kigyar ship, and thus taking their attention away from the Razor Crest flying under their shields. Next time, kiddos, you're going to have to figure it out on your own, but Papa shall help you for the time being. Now, of course, the squad of clones here is still quite young, so they did exactly what most 15-year-olds would do when they can't figure something out. They started beating on the side of the ship like a drum trying to get through it, but it seems they're having some issues with the hull foam generator. Looks like we're going to have to try to use our heads here, gentlemen, instead of our fist for a moment. Lucky enough for them, it would seem that Papa Napoleon has sent a very teeny tiny nuclear charge with him that they can use. Absolutely perfect, just what the doctor ordered for destroying plenty of the hull all at once, allowing them to infiltrate the ship before it could repair itself. Now that they're finally aboard the ship undetected, this would begin the stealthy part of the mission, and at first it kinda sorta started out that way, but again, they are new to this sort of thing, and they kinda went in guns blazing, but to be honest with you, it seems to be working out for them. Slowly but surely, they began making their way to the center of the ship. Now, most of the time in this series so far, we've been attacking places to get their resources, but this time, it's a little different. We don't care about the resources, we care about annihilating these pirates to make an example out of them. The next part of the plan, we're going to need to destroy one of the shield generators of the ship, preferably the one in the back. The reason being is because we need to be very far away from this nuclear warhead when it goes off, otherwise we're going to lose our new squad. So we plan on using the station's weapons to aim right for where we place the warhead, that way we can detonate it from a very far distance away as our new squad is making their grand escape. Well, I think that takes care of that. No more filthy Kigyar pirates in orbit. We'll let the majority of this ship rain down upon the torturous marauders on the planet. That way they know what happens when you mess with the Empire. That being said, though, with his mission a complete success, they did leave a little bit of the ship intact, and it would be such a shame to let the entire thing rain down on the infamous pirates of the planet, don't you think? So instead, we decided to bring the front half of the trade ship, the part that's not radioactive at the moment, over with our salvage base, and we'll start deconstructing that for some resources. Though pirates and the organization are a major concern for us, something else that draws my attention are the deserters on the planet, the old Empire who attacked us last episode and is just so damn unwilling to join us. I say we take them over. To go about doing this, we are actually going to utilize quite a bit of our reserves of silver to settle about 8 or so bases. Funny enough, not all of the deserters are unwilling to join us. Some of them, if we're willing to pay them to set up these little bases, would come to our side. But these deserters that we're hiring to set up our bases will not be our little mercenary army. Since so many of them are so untrustworthy, we would have them set up these facilities made with cloning areas areas. That way we could create our own clone army on the planet and in orbit with our station. And after just a few days, we had enough clones to go about beginning to enslave the population of deserters. And so we begin our takeover. Now, with such a brutal civil war engulfing the planet between my empire and theirs, I suppose we should check in on the troops. Well, it sure looks a hell of a lot like we're winning to me, and you know what? I think that is what is most important. Now, some of you may have some qualms with our method of rebuilding the Empire once more, but I must remind you, my friends, that these deserters are indeed deserters, meaning that they are cowards, and there is no room for cowards in the new Empire. But with all the fighting and fun that was going on the surface, the Emperor was feeling a little bit left out, so he decided to go down on his own to get in on the fun. It's been far too long since we had any fresh air, and even longer since we've had the thrill of slaughtering these cowards. I know that everyone else has been doing it in the army, but Napoleon has yet to get his fill for his bloodlust. Plus, this city's not going to slaughter itself, or even conquer itself for that matter, so we had to step in. For even as useful as our clone army is, they are a little bit slow to action, and plus they love to hog all the fun. Over already, I suppose. Well, not to worry, I do have the big finale just waiting inside the ship. Such a shame to see our little pals gone so soon, but I suppose it's time for us to return home. After returning back aboard the station, it would seem we have some good news. While in our absence we were on the surface, we seem to have won this war. As you can see, with all the territories here on the planet, it would seem that the Civil War has ended and in our favor, though I suppose it will never truly end as long as the deserters still exist, but I'm pretty comfortable basically calling this war over because we've taken over essentially 95% of their territories, and where there was once a shattered kingdom of cowards and traitors that was built on a foundation of sand, there is now a true empire in its place, and the traitors and cowards have scurried like the rats that they are into the crevices and corners of the planet, hiding from the light. What few cities that they have left reduced to ash and rubble, abandoned, overrun with pirates and every ne'er-do-well known to this planet. Order has finally been restored here, with a proper imperial government being placed, with it being us, of course, but our work isn't even close to being done yet. But it would seem that we currently have a bit of an interruption, as our sensors on board the station have picked up some type of moon in orbit around the planet, which is very odd because the heavenly object is much smaller than the planet's actual moon. My dear God, that's no moon. It appears to be some type of elaborate ancient spherical Arcotech space station. And perhaps worst of all, it's detected us and it is far from friendly. Our station's engines roared to life and we wasted absolutely no time firing upon it. The only issue was, the shields of this ancient space station were incredible, and our own station's shields couldn't hold a candle to them. Easily overwhelmed, failing in an instant, we would now have to rely on our hull until they're back up in action. With no other option, the clones would rush to their gunships to begin making their way towards this artificial moon, as we would be bearing the brunt of its attack. Using every single last weapon that we had aboard our station, we would attack that damn dirty Arcotech sphere. But unfortunately, you could probably guess it didn't really do all that much, except maybe distract it from attacking our gunships. Speaking of which, our clones would finally arrive, and they would hop out of their ships and begin firing at the rail guns of the spherical moon to try and make their way inside and begin attacking its overlords. The thing is, once we made our way inside, there were plenty of mechanoids as we had suspected, as the Arcotech civilization used plenty of these forerunner types of non-living creatures, but we also found plenty of Void associates and even a few of the Imperial deserters. If I were a guessing man, which I am of course, I would say that both the organization and the deserters attempted to attack this station a little bit before we got here in the hopes that they would be able to use it against us and also each other. Quite a foolish decision of theirs not to suspect that we too would also detect this little artificial moon in orbit around the planet. Or maybe they knew that all along, and this was their last hope of defeating us. Nevertheless, we would eventually begin blasting our way through the entire station until we came upon the control room. It seems that this place is controlled solely by AI. But I'm afraid that even with the swift action of our army, by this point we had lost a massive chunk out of our cloning station. There was only one way to stop this. We can't risk wasting any more time, and we can't risk anyone else getting their hands on this artificial moon. You know what we have to do, boys. As a small squad of 3 clones who were already extremely injured, knowing that they probably wouldn't make it back home anyhow, began prepping the warhead for detonation and prepping this station for its demolition, we had the remainder of our soldiers escape. A selfless sacrifice for the good of the universe. You might think of clones as expendable, but I think of them as heroes. Alright, boys, one last time. For the Emperor. Shockingly, even after a massive detonation like that, somehow the outer shell of the sphere still remained for the most part. And shocking to no one, some of the organization's cockroaches managed to completely avoid the blast altogether and also survived. Damn dirty bastards. In case you thought that I was being dramatic earlier when those clones sacrificed themselves to take out the Arcotech sphere moon, you can take a good look at our station here. We basically lost the entire front half, and with how long it was taking them to move throughout that station to destroy weapons and shields, we most likely would have completely lost our station if they hadn't done that. Even now, with the destruction of the enemy artificial moon, we still have a bunch of mechanite nanites that are trying to tear our station apart and have to be stomped out and destroyed by our clones. Speaking of the enemy station, we had actually used our salvage base to bring what little pieces we could find of it left out there of the outer shell back over to our station so we could begin deconstructing it. Now, initially, I had thought about adding these pieces onto our station, though I couldn't exactly find any good places for them to fit, and if we started deconstructing them to make them smaller pieces, would it really matter anyhow? No. No, I don't think it would. But not all would be lost when we deconstructed the Archotech hull. We would actually repurpose and use this technology to build ourselves a brand new, powerful shield generator. Damn near identical to the one that the sphere itself was using, meaning that our station will be damn near impenetrable with this. And now I do realize that having the shield encompass such a large area so far outside around the station might seem a little impractical, but hear me out. The reason we're doing that is to protect our ships that are also under the shield but can't get too close to the station because we don't have a shuttle bay large enough to actually hold them, unfortunately, from the Save Our Ship 2 mod. So we're just kind of making do with what we can here. Now, utilizing the rest of the resources from the sphere that we've deconstructed as well as the resources that we currently already had, we began repairing our station, rebuilding many of the sections of it that we had already had. We would have to, of course, remove the hull foam from our distributor, which was trying its little heart out to keep us safe and to rebuild the station as it was basically being bombarded with plasma blast. Anyhow, though, we quickly rebuilt our sections and wings with all our weapons, our mech laboratory, and last but not least, we would also end up rebuilding our nuclear power generator room, but not only one this time. I've decided to add in two. And as you can see on the outer shell of our hull, I've also replaced it with a reinforced upgraded mechanoid hull for a third layer. Not only would we add in this brand new reinforced mechanoid hull layer around our nuclear generators though, no my friends, we would add it around the entire station. The whole damn thing. Weapons, the engines, everything, baby. We are gonna turn this little floating tin can into a reinforced tin can, by God. Not only would we increase its defensive capabilities in terms of how many hits it can take if and when the shield falls, which by this point, with a new shield like this, I don't even know if it ever will, but we would also end up adding in many more plasma and railguns. Now, I will say I am fully aware that we could add in one of the spinal variety of railguns, that type of weapon that is quite long, like we saw on the artificial moon base there, but I don't really want to do that because the station here is more just trying to defend itself and make us clones to help take over this planet and the galaxy. It's not really going to be used for offensive capabilities, more defensive, and that's the only reason I'm not doing that. But my friends, by this point, our station is the most well-defended thing in this entire solar system, I would say. With our new Archotech shield, our reinforced layers of hull, with some of them being up to 4 to 5 layers thick, I think it's pretty safe to say that the station can take care of itself and make as many damn clones as humanly possible to reinforce us. But I know what you're saying, friends. Rat Daddy, you have what's basically an indestructible space station in orbit around the planet that can continue supplying your army with endless amounts of soldiers. You've basically taken over as the primary government of the planet, and all you really have to do left is to take down the organization and some pirates. So, where do we go next? Well, that is a very good question, my friends, and we have a lot of different options. The world is quite literally our oyster at this point. What would you like to see us do next? Until next time. Hello and welcome back to our well-defended domain in the stars, me compadres. There's ever so much work to be done today and so little time, eh, Wart? Let's get to it. I'm not gonna beat around the bush or sugarcoat anything today, friends. We are starting off very hot and heavy by building ourselves a Hammerhead-class starship. And just in case you think that I would botch the design of this ship, as you can see, I actually have the blueprint just a little bit to the left here for comparison's sake in terms of its scale and its design. With our army of clones building away, it wouldn't take very long at all to get the outer shell and the internal hull of the ship complete. But now it's time for us to begin working on the internal portions of the ship, the guts of the ship if you will, with some batteries, our nuclear engines, as well as about 3 or so fission reactors to keep this bad boy powered. powered. Realistically, every ship needs a heart, and I find it best that this one has triple. We would also take a good bit of time to go about finishing up the rest of the internal portions of the ship as well. Plenty of heat sink areas, a shield generator, some weapon systems, and of course some places for our crew to sleep. Because, of course, the ship needs to be able to defend itself, but we also need it to be able to haul any resources that we get from, well, the surface of the planet, or perhaps a ship battle, but also we need somewhere for all of our clones to sleep, as you could imagine. Last but not least, we chucked in the old brains of the ship itself, and also a life support system, and we also threw in our console so that we could pilot this bad boy. Nothing too fancy, just your standard hammerhead warship. We've built many of these throughout the Empire, and we have our clone army using them in other quadrants of the galaxy, yada yada yada. However, this particular warship is actually going to have a hyperdrive, the same hyperdrive that we had taken from the pirate vessel that we commandeered, deconstructed, you remember from episode 1, I'm sure. And speaking of which, not to worry, as we would also move in the pirates who are sleeping in their cryo-sleep caskets into the warhead as well. Still not quite sure what we're going to do with them, but they'll be tagging along for the ride. You know who else is going to be tagging along for the ride, though? Good old Wart. We can't just leave his brain in this pod on the station. No, I'm afraid we can't leave our companion, our old general, and, well, whatever's left of him, I suppose, behind. Along with the Emperor and Wart is the Emperor's elite guard, but we will also be taking our new squad of clones that we created last episode as well. They'll need the experience, so of course we do plan on sending them on some special missions. And they'll get to work hand in hand with the Emperor himself. Lucky dogs. But before we go off gallivanting around in our new warship, we do need to give our station a proper name. Suggested by our friend the Event Horizon 909, we have the Haven Station in reference to the Haven-class medical stations from Star Wars, an excellent name if I do say so myself, and thus Haven Station is born. Well, it's been born, you know what I mean. Not to worry though, they'll be able to take care of themselves up here in orbit, especially because we're going to be leaving behind our fleet of gunships to them. We have more than enough current clones to defend the station with all of their guns and their numerous copious amounts of numbers and manpower. Of course, we have our superior Archotech shield along with all of our plasma cannons and railgun cannons and cannons galore essentially to defend it. But since we're taking Wart, we do need to build a computer core aboard the station. That way we have a new AI for the station itself to go about taking care of things. Not only will this minimize the amount of work that the clones need to put into maintenance and other things to make sure that the station doesn't fall out of the sky, but also, this also makes sure that our surrogate droids are running properly and up to par and not accidentally squishing any clone babies or letting them starve to death, that sort of thing. They were previously connected to Wart, so if we left without creating a new station AI, they would essentially just be nothing but tin cans again. The station's new AI is going to be named Camino, and you may have already seen this a moment ago, but this is yet another homage to Star Wars. I'm sure you already know that one though. But without further ado, my friends, it is time for us to take our hammerhead ship down to the planet's surface, away from the station. Again though, there is no cause for alarm, as the station is still in orbit and is actually going to be floating around up there the entire time that we are on the surface, so if we were to maybe need to call in some reinforcements, we could do so, or if we just want to pop in for a visit to make sure the cloning process is up to par. But we have finally arrived at our destination on the northern polar ice caps of the planet. A barren, frozen landscape where there is quite literally nothing here, other than ice, that is, of course, and we are pretty far away from any other faction settlement. This is where we'll be setting up our imperial capital on the city, as well, to be honest with you, we just really like a challenge. Which, as you can see, is the exact same reason we didn't bring any of the resources that we had on Haven Station down to the surface with us either. Just as always, we plan on making our own way. But, if you'll excuse me, I spot something in the sky. Well, if it isn't the Covenant come to check out the ship landed near them, I suppose. This should be fun. Well, that was kind of boring. They were so easily taken down, I'm afraid. And they were so weak with such pathetic armor and weapons, I don't even think it would be worth turning them into slaves of the Empire. We had considered turning them into a grunt and brute sorbet or stew of sorts, but they also left plenty of meals, so I suppose we'll eat those instead. And even though their weapons weren't anything useful to us and they were quite weak, we could take them and sell them perhaps just to make some silver, just so we could fund our imperial projects, I suppose. Some of them, though, were a little bit nostalgic, you could say, for some of our compadres like Wart here. In case you're wondering, he used to be a Sangheili general in the Covenant, and then, of course, he had turned to Void after almost being killed, yada yada. He's our friend now, don't worry about it. Though as we gaze upon our new pile of junk, I do begin to realize that these drop ships might come in handy, especially since we don't currently have the resources to build our own gunships. I suppose they're better than nothing for the time being, and it might be a bit of fun, who knows. First though, we need to begin some cleanup efforts and spend some time hauling in all of our junk inside, like the silver and all the weapons that we had previously mentioned before we use the ships. With that completed, it's time for us to head out and pay a visit to our old friends, the organization. Yes indeed, good old Void is once again going to hand over, you could say, their resources and their lives to us. Though, as you well know, we do plan on acquiring their resources by force. It's not as if they're just going to hand them over. As we were engaging with their defenses and we began to infiltrate their little fortress here, we decided that we would split up into two groups. The Emperor and his elite guard entourage, as well as our new squad. They can't be hanging off the Emperor's hip the whole time. Ah, this sure is fun, isn't it? Such a shame it can't last forever. With all of their associates, bodyguards, and grinders, and whatever else they call their soldiers, dead, well, the only thing really stopping us were their mutants, and they were quite easy to take care of as well. Making getting these resources back in our little dropships here nothing but child's play. Now, the hard part is getting all these resources hauled into our Hammerhead warship, and this is going to take an extremely long amount of time, given the amount of items that we've taken, of course. So much so, in fact, that at one point I thought it would actually just be a much better idea if we left all those resources on the ground and started working on our city while they're laying out there, instead of getting them hauled in anyway, because, well, we're going to be using them regardless. The very first building that we would actually begin working on was going to be the palace of the Emperor himself. Something of a capital building, I suppose, in our capital city, you could say. Even given all of our manpower and all of our abundance of resources, this process took an extremely long time, mostly due in part to the fact that all of the flooring was some type of polished or fine flooring, which takes more resources and more time. Nothing but the best for our Emperor, though. As you can see, we actually have 4 main sections of the palace. We have our throne room, which is adorned with many braziers, as well as several hyperweave rugs, couches, and even some curtains. Many pews and lighting, even with the finest steel and gold throne that this planet has to offer. We also have our dining room with some very exotic tables and chairs that are nice and comfortable, as well as chess tables to entertain ourselves as well as our guest if we were to maybe have some diplomats over from the UNSC or something. We also have a few pianos in there so our clones can entertain them with music as well. We also have the Emperor's quarters with his bed and basic commodity oddities like that, he also has his very own bar, an extremely large television, tabletop game, holodeck, essentially just many different things to entertain him in between his day-to-day duties of governing the entire galaxy, or at least the parts that we currently control. Last but not least, the fourth section of the palace is actually something of a planning and communications room where we can go about communicating with our fleets, our generals, our armies, and also planning out attacks in different parts of the galaxy. You understand. Not exactly perfect, but it is a very good start of a palace on this planet, and also a very good start to the capital city here, I feel. Specifically since this isn't our home world, and of course it is only one of the many planets under our control. The next thing we began working on were some actual defenses around the palace in the form of some very large charge railguns on each side of the palace itself. After that, we started working on a very durable and tough high security fence around the entire city. Now this is temporary, and I do want to replace it after a while with some proper walls and other defenses, but this will help us outline the place for now. We began building some simple asphalt roads as well to just kind of help us with how we're going to be laying out our structures. We don't normally use all that many ground vehicles except maybe some speeders, so I suppose they'll be useful for that though. We would once again begin building around our palace though. This time around we're actually going to be building something of a resource depot where we can park many of our gunships, a cruiser, and also just some small Imperial shuttles. Now this little depot for the time being is actually going to be how we travel back and forth between places such as, say for example, our Haven station in orbit. Now of course throughout this process we were occasionally getting quite a few raids from Void and the pirates and other factions, but in particular Void was realistically the only one that we needed to worry about, it would seem. I had noticed that our new squad of clones were actually taking quite a bit of damage when encountering the organization. Seems like there should be something we can do to counteract this. And indeed, I believe there is something we can do about it. We immediately began working on a brand new laboratory and/or manufacturing building, one that is more akin to the Imperium of Man than the Empire, I believe. It's time that we begin delving and dabbling with a few machine spirits and some other odd things that the Imperium has, such as their wonderful armor. I introduce to you, my friends, our very own clone Marines. I mean, they already have insane fighting skills, augmentations, and genetics. We might as well give them the armor to match. And as a matter of fact, we went ahead and gave the entire squad their very own types of this Marine armor. Our very first clone Marine squad, I might add. Something of a personal pet project to the Emperor, I'm sure. And who knows, if the results of this yield quite well, and you guys like the video, we might end up doing more with him, possibly even a spin-off series. But now that we have our squad somewhat complete, we also need a name. Luckily, our friend the Grizzly Giant 7495 has a name suggestion in the form of Clone Force 99, which I believe is also a reference to the Bad Batch, and I very much like it. And thus that is what we're going to be calling them. I initially was just going to call them the Bad Batch, but I thought that it might be a little too on the nose, so we'll stick with Clone Force 99. I also wanted to mention that these clone Marines are based on a meme that I saw on Twitter, which is pretty funny, but also very inspirational, of course, and you should also follow me on Twitter, by the way. With that taken care of, it was time for us to continue working on our city, making more improvements and building something of a large warehouse, and something else that I think may end up being something of a workshop. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with these buildings, so I'll handle that off screen. We were also getting quite low on certain resources, and I knew that we had them, I just didn't know where we had put them. So when I was deconstructing the shabby old Covenant dropships, I ended up finding them all. But this isn't exactly a city building series. I know that there's a good portion of you fine folks who want to see some action, and that's exactly what I'm going to give you. Void has continued their expansion on this planet despite our best efforts from the cloning facilities and our armies, and thus increased their iron grip. They've even managed to settle a base not too far from our capital city, and thus, because of this, we're going to be sending out our new squad, the Clone Force 99, to take care of them. Cue the montage. Well, that sure was fun, huh? Perhaps one of the best parts, though, is that our squad, along with one ship, has managed to take out a huge chunk of the organization's forces and bases. Meanwhile, back at our polar ice cap city, we are going to be building some proper power plants to keep this city fueled and to keep our lights, as well as all of our weapon systems, online. Now, initially, I was only going to build one of these power plants, with it solely being nuclear power, but then I realized that we also had an absolute shit ton of the Void Tech power cells in the Hammerhead cruiser, and thus I decided to build a backup power station out of those specifically. Now, I didn't crunch the numbers on exactly how much power we're going to be making here, but I'm pretty sure that we could power half of the planet. I don't know though. I do know though that as we continue our genocide against the organization known as Void and the Covenant forces, of course, in tandem with the UNSC's help, we're going to have a lot of bodies that need disposed of, and thus we're going to be burning them, because burning or blowing up the corpses of Void associates is the only way to keep them from reviving. We also wanted to build a shuttle bay for the city's security forces. Now, originally I was going to build some of the skip ships, as they are commonly the ships that we'll use, but instead I actually decided to go with some of the shuttles, as they can be upgraded with multiple different types of plasma, laser, and just normal uranium turret weaponry. But most importantly, perhaps, is the fact that these shuttles can go into what's called a hover mode and essentially drive like a ground vehicle, such as a speeder, and monitor the premises of the city. Speaking of which, we would also end up building several barrage cannon turrets around both sides of the entrances of the city, mostly for show, as our army and even the Emperor himself are really the true defense and backbone behind any defendable territory here. Speaking of which, though, once we begin getting more clones into the city, as well as Imperials, now that we are creating a true empire once more on this planet, we need jobs for them. We need places for them if they were to get injured, and we also need a recreational area for them. So we essentially built something of a poker hall for them. We ended up building something of a small manufacturing plant, as well as a pretty decent sized hospital. Obviously, though, for the residents of the city, which is mostly going to consist of our military forces, being this the capital city, or at least a makeshift capital city for this planet, we also need some residential housing for them, which we quickly ended up building as well. Nothing too fancy, once again, all gray and dull, with a few beds and places to eat, and a few couches with some televisions to try to keep them entertained. To truly keep them entertained, entertained though, I also thought that next to the poker hall, we could maybe have something of a bar, a little cantina of sorts where you could go and wet your whistle. Though the clones may be quite expendable and whatnot, they also like to have a drink every now and then, if you know what I mean. Naturally, we also finished up this corner of the city with a hydroponics area where we'll be growing all of the food for the city, and we also built a laboratory for any research projects that we may need to do. While we were here, we had a small pack of wild huskies wander into the area, and we decided to take pity on them. Sure, we're genocidal maniacs trying to take over the galaxy, but we do love doggos. Man's best friend stays consistent anywhere in this universe, baby. But now for the true coup de grace of the city. Half of this entire city, if not more than that realistically, is going to be a gigantic landing port for our Hammerhead cruisers. These ships are a vital backbone for taking over any planet as well as quadrants of a galaxy, and thus why we are going to have a large portion of this area be a port for them where we can work on them and command them, essentially, helping us keep a firm grip on the throats of the masses. But then after doing so, I realized that this city really doesn't have any aerial defenses, or at least not yet. So around the Emperor's palace and then around the city and other areas as well, we ended up building some very large laser turrets similar to what you would actually see on the cruisers themselves. And with those, as well as the ones throughout the city, I think we shouldn't have any issue with void drop pods falling down on us, as we can blast them out of the sky. But ladies and gentlemen, with that, our capital city is finally complete. Hardly a capital, I understand, but on a backwater planet like this, it really doesn't take much. We just need some type of command post to govern from. But even with the completion of our city, we still have many threats to the planet, such as the organization, as well as the torturous marauders, who are like a rat infesting this planet in every single corner, and extremely hard to exterminate because they constantly pop back up, probably even worse so than Void. By this point, many of the deserter Imperials have decided to change their minds a bit, as they really don't have any other government to turn to, and thus we are going to be equipping the masses with some proper Imperial weapons and armor, and allowing them to fight for us. Of course, they're not going to be very good at fighting off the organization, but the torturous marauders, I think that they might just stand a chance. Standing shoulder to shoulder with our clones, the Imperials will be a healthy addition to our forces. This is their home, after all. Our capital city is built, the shattered empire of this planet is rebuilt, and that only leaves one question. What to do next? Well, of course, the Emperor and Warlord still have quite a bit of governing to do on this planet before they move on to conquer the next, but in the meantime, our Clone Force 99 could go on their own little mission. For their little mission, we're going to be sending them off in our Hammerhead warship, but we were also sure to get Warlord's brain out of there, that way we can keep him here on the surface with us. Though this mission is a bit hush-hush between the Clone Force and the Emperor, I know that whatever it is, they will do it to the best of their ability. They'll be kissing the surface goodbye for the time being and heading into the heavens to join the rest of our fleet, at least for the time being. And as we look down upon the planet with our swarm of ships engulfing it, I think it goes without saying that this place is truly ours. Though I am afraid that our clone force isn't going to be staying in orbit around the planet. No, they're actually going to be using our hyperdrive to go on find their own adventure, I suppose. But before we go about doing so, we thought it might be a good idea to finally wake wake up our enslaved pirate crew from their hypersleep. Perhaps they'll be of use to us and can tell us about some high-end pirate hideouts that we can go and attack in the name of the Emperor. Or, be it that they pirates, perhaps they know of some hidden treasure. Only time will tell, I suppose. But it's time for us to go now. Perhaps they'll find new, chaotic enemies to battle and new planets to conquer in the name of the Emperor. But one thing is for sure, the Empire is back. Ah, yes indeed, the beautiful sandy shores of Igaria, a small ocean planet with a dwarf-sized desert continent in the outer rim of the galaxy, an ample place for piracy and mercenaries, as well as bounty hunters. The name is Orzo, and I am a veteran of the Shattered Empire. You see, I am technically 652 years old because quite a while ago I went into cryosleep when the planet's atmosphere was failing with many other Shattered Empire soldiers, only to awaken to a new government. The Federation, much like the Shattered Empire of old, except much, much more cruel. They also have a deep-seated hatred for the old Empire and any of the old Imperial soldiers, i.e. why they hate us. Yes, indeed, it's not exactly the most lavish life we could be living here on this desolate desert planet, but it is quite beautiful. I must say though, even though I love the beauty of the shores, I much rather prefer the hustle and bustle of the cities. Now you do have to be quite careful in these cities as there is danger lurking around every corner with as many pirates, bandits, looters, and God knows what else in these cities and on this planet quite frankly. But you can always find a fine place to wet your whistle. Agaria is chock full of bars, but bars like these are few and far between. For you see, this bar is owned and operated by a bunch of Imperial veterans just like myself. Most of the time it's just a great place to sit around, play some billiards and chit-chat a bit, and perhaps even get drunk, slap off your arse on some exotic rum. But it is also the perfect place for us to go about hearing some chit-chat about new warrants and possible bounty targets in the system. We hunters tend to stick together and share info when necessary. Speaking of which, it would seem that I have my very first target wanted for kidnapping and also worth 1,250 silver. Now the easy part, tracking him down. It would seem that he's fled to a nearby city controlled by the pirate organization known as the Torturous Marauders. It was the perfect environment for an assassination attempt. With how rainy it is and how dark it is, visibility is sure to be extremely low, and though this might hinder our shooting, it also means that they'll never see us sneaking up. Although I think they have their hands tied as it is anyhow, it would appear that the Marauders and some Junkers are in something of a clash at the moment. Battling in war caskets like this, we could feel the shake in the ground with every hit. Then all of a sudden, in the distance, out of a building walked our target. The hunt is on. I rush behind a pillar of wood, taking aim off of it with my hand up against it, managing to get a lucky shot in at him. He would flee behind his own pillar of stone, and a shootout would ensue between the two of us. He may have been wearing heavy marine armor, but lucky enough for me, his militia rifle was very inaccurate, most likely due to poor quality and also cleaning methods. Because of the inaccuracies of his weapon, I decided it would be a safe bet to rush him. I ran up to the same stone pillar and shot him in the head. Now with him dead, he's not going to be missing that horrible rifle and his combat knife, or even the survival meals, I'm sure. And we just made an easy 1,200 buckaroos. Now with some starting cash in hand, I thought it might be a good idea for us to go ahead and set up our very own base of operations. Traveling directly north of the pirate city, we would encounter some small mountains, which I thought would be an ample place for our home, at least for the time being. Now, now it was time for us to unload our riches and what few meals we had brought with us. However, given the devious, malicious, thieving nature of most folks on this planet, it's not going to be very safe leaving our money out like this, and if we don't eat those meals quick, animals will surely get them, so we need to begin working on a proper home. We were right next to an extremely small little hill, and I thought to myself, instead of going about building some wooden canopies or a small little house outside of a hill, why don't we hollow it out on the inside, and that way we'll be a bit safer, and it'll also be harder for people to discover that this is where we're staying. Collecting some wood from the area, we could also go about putting some proper flooring and also a few bits and bobs of furniture in as well. The perfect bounty hunter hideout. And although I will admit the conditions were a little bit cramped to say the least, I can't tell you how good it feels to be sleeping in a proper bed once more, even if I feel like the walls are going to collapse at any moment. For the rest of our time in this area, we actually began exploring a little bit and deconstructing some ruins that we found in this region, as we could use the resources like steel. But we had also found very large piles of calcified junk. It's not uncommon for the Federation to use places like this as their dumping ground for the waste from their ships. But something interesting is that if you dig this calcified junk, you can sometimes find some very useful items. For example, I managed to find several plasma cartridges, many different life support packs and med kits, and many other things. Not only could we use these items and resources to our advantage, but if the time calls for it, we could also sell them to try to upgrade our gear. Speaking of which, we have our very next bounty target. We may not even need to sell anything if we can continue getting some pretty steady work. It appears to be an Ungoi who had deserted their chapter of the Covenant and joined up with the Federation. He's not worth all that much, but at the moment he appears to be the only humanoid target that we have. We had heard whispers and rumblings that he was just due south in some little desert hills at an outpost, so of course we began to track him down. However, after arriving, one thing was apparent. It looks like we didn't get all the info because the Ungoi was not alone. A Federalist Sangheili. This fella is no doubt going to be extremely dangerous. Sangheili are much stronger and much faster than humans. I'm not exactly sure what type of union these two have together, but one thing is for sure, this hunt is not going to be near as easy as we hoped. I immediately took cover behind some rocks, taking aim with the iron sights of my bolt-action rifle, firing at the Ungoi, but managing to hit the Sangheili as well. Uh-oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. You see, the issue is we were supposed to bring him in alive, and now he's dead. Not only that, but we have a very pissed off Federalist Sangheili who just watched us kill his comrade. I decided that I wanted to try to get in a bit more close, and then eventually I thought it could be a good idea if we tried to bust open the building to hide inside to ambush the Sangheili, but he started firing at me. With no other option, I would be forced to flee the area, and thankfully I would be able to do so with my life. Well, it would seem that that mission was a complete failure, and we're not going to be making any money today. I think that this may have something to do with the fact that my bolt-action rifle couldn't even begin to put a scratch in the Sangheili's Federation armor. Perhaps we should go about upgrading our gear, I said to myself in my head, and of course I agreed. We immediately went back home, picked up many of the items that we got from our junk piles, and went off to some nearby Outlanders to sell it. It was during this time that we would also attempt to purchase ourselves a better rifle as well as some apparel. And as you can see, I think we did a pretty fair job. Now this charge rifle should do much better than our pathetic bolt-action rifle, although I couldn't really find all that much armor. Hopefully this hood will at least give us a little bit of protection for the old dome. Although maneuvering should be much easier, as we also managed to purchase a salvaged Covenant jump pack for those situations where we need to move around in a hurry. Now that we've upgraded all the armor, weapons, and everything else on our person, I thought that it might be quite fitting and very crucial for us to go about upgrading our hideout. Specifically specifically with some actual electricity, but also a few new bear traps, spike traps, some barricades made of duracrete for us to hide behind for cover, and also a military-grade turret that will protect the base while we're out on our missions. And by the time we were finished, I was much happier with how this was compared to previously, and it was still quite discreet except for the large solar panel sticking out the side, but we'll deal with that later. Now then, moving on, it is time for our next hunt. It would appear that we're going to have to hunt down some type of abomination, an arco-panda, an amalgamation of machine and creature. Unfortunately, this is really our only choice as we don't currently have any humanoid subjects to hunt at the moment. Now, I'm not one for hunting down innocent animals without good reason, so I find it important that you people know the reason that this panda has a bounty on its head is because it's been sneaking around some of the local sand people villages and eating their babies. Yes, they're babies. Sick little freak, isn't he? We snuck up between a small little valley in the hills and began taking fire at it with our rifle. The only problem was this malfunctioning monster was on the run. As we fired at it, it was attempting to escape the region, and if that happened, we might not be able to track it down again so easily, so we had to do something to stop it. Using my jump pack, I managed to keep up with the creature and get close enough to give it a good little poke in the old ribs with a bayonet on the end of my charge rifle. Then and only then did it finally begin to attack me back, keeping it from running away. It would begin chasing after me for a hot moment, but as it would do so, I continued firing at it and eventually it would have to give in to its injuries. Sorry about this, old girl, but even on a planet full of murderers, thieves, and the lowest of the low, eating babies still ain't cool. Ah, you smell that? That's the smell of panda burgers and plenty of silver in our future. With all of our newfound riches, I thought that I might go out and purchase yet another weapon, one that is slightly different than our charge rifle. This is an anti-material rifle, and it packs one hell of a punch. You see, this type of rifle specializes in a piercing damage compared to our charge rifle's heat-based damage. That way, if we have a target with a different type of armor. Ah yes, I see a soft, squishy target now that this rifle would be absolutely perfect for. A powerful weapon like this is extremely useful and of course extremely intimidating, and it really makes our hunts a little bit of a cakewalk, turning our targets into Swiss cheese. And thus earning us a lot of smackaroonies. After a few more hunts and selling a bit more bits and bobs that we found in the large calcified trash piles, we were able to buy ourselves a nice helmet to go with the rest of our not exactly up to par armor. But all our hard work appears to have attracted the attention of the Federation, and they have dispatched an assassin along with his lady servant to try and kill us. Ah yes, a hunter versus a hunter. As we rushed to cover behind our duracrete barriers, they were forced to try to take whatever cover they could behind some rock chunks out in the sands, leading to the death of the servant. But as for the assassin, he was still at large, hiding like a shadow in those chunks. We were firing aimlessly into the dunes, hoping, praying even, that we would hit him. It was during this time, though, that I realized that our charge rifle would be much better to take him down, and thus I used my jump pack to get behind him, fire, and kill him. Ah, well that sure was kind of them to bring me some dinner for this evening. Now, with the imminent threat neutralized, I thought it might be a good idea if we went through and spruced up our base a little bit. This isn't some type of tavern or cabin. For God's sake, I'm a bounty hunter out in the rim of space. We need something more appropriate. So I started off with some layered, beautiful metal flooring. I also think that the base could use a little bit of an expansion for a storage room. That way we're not keeping all of our junk in the same place that we're doing business and also eating and sleeping, of course. And by the end of it, I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Much less discreet than it was before, but I think that we have the military means now for ourselves to protect ourselves properly. You'll also notice notice that I encased our solar panel to ensure that it doesn't get damaged during raids. I also built myself a computer system that is linked to the Hunter's Warrant network. That way it should be quite easy for us to go about picking out our next targets right here in the comfort of our own home. But if you thought that was something, you're really going to be impressed with the next move that we make, baby, as we are deconstructing some spaceship chunks as well as mining out components and steel from the nearby hills here, as well as smelting down steel chunks, but more importantly plasteel chunks from all the calcified junk piles that we've been mining. And the reason that we're collecting and stockpiling all these resources is we, out of junk, salvage, and some purchased parts, I must admit, with all of our hunting earnings, are going to be building our very own ship. Not only will it operate as a mobile home, but it will also make it much easier to travel in between our bounty targets. Although I must admit it is going to take an extremely long amount of time to finish. Plus, we don't currently have enough resources to finish it, so let's move on to our next target. A Jerohani that is wanted for loitering with a very large bounty on his head for some reason. Something tells me that he may have a few other warrants for something less non-violent. With a small, inconspicuous hideout like this, I can see why he hasn't been caught just yet, but as the rain begins to pour and skew their visibility, as we always like when we attack, we could see that he was not alone. A waster pirate companion, either from or rebelling against the torturous marauders. Either way, I don't think she'll be much trouble. With his companion dead, the target would attempt to flee the area while firing at us, but thanks to my jump pack, that wouldn't be so easy for him to achieve. As the coward continued to try to flee the region, I continued to give chase, shooting at him all the while he was sloshing in the mud before I ended up finishing him off. Another rainy day, another rainy dollar, baby. Think I'll buy myself something nice this time around. And boy, did I ever. Unfortunately, none of the Outlanders or pirates were selling any Mandalorian armor to go along with my helmet, but I ended up getting the next best thing, some commando power armor with a very similar color. Now, hopefully with this type of protection, I won't have to worry about using so many damn med packs all the time for my injuries. Now that we're armed and armored to the teeth, it's time for us to finish up our ship. We're just working on the internal portions at the moment, like the ship's capacitor to store power, as well as the sensors and the drone core, and also the life support systems to keep us alive in case something happens and we need to take our helmet off up there. We don't want anything to go wrong once we achieve orbit, not only because, well, we'll die, but as you can see, all the money that we've made has been spent in purchasing advanced components and a few other things that we needed for the ship. But with that, my friends, I think it is time for us to go above and beyond, if you know what I mean. We're no longer just your standard bounty hunter. We're going pro to the big leagues, baby. I haven't seen the planet from this angle since I had been promoted in the Imperial Forces, learning on the station how to wear some cataphractic armor. Those were the days. She may not be quite as lush as I remember, with plenty of vegetation and green grass, but she's still just as beautiful. From this angle, we'll have access to every single warrant in the entire network for the entire planet, meaning that we have a much bigger clientele all of a sudden. I believe we just became a global businessman with a chance of becoming interplanetary very shortly. Now then, I suppose it's time for us to get back to work, going down the list of potential money bags. I mean, targets, that is. Full speed ahead, baby. We are coming down. We would be able to easily land anywhere we chose, in this particular case right in their own backyard. This particular target had something of a bodyguard companion, so I whipped out the old combat knife and gutted him like a fish. With him out of the way, the only other person here was the bounty, and after a few blasts to the old noggin from the charge rifle, they would die too. I must say though, there is a little bit of an issue. We do still have to get this target to a nearby settlement to collect our warrant reward, and the only way to do so right now would be to try to fly back into orbit and then down, and then you get the gist. So that's going to be quite impractical. Instead, we would end up deconstructing many of the electronics and mechanical components around this little hideout, and we would actually utilize those to go about making some very special parts. Say hello to our jet bike. We ended up giving it a more appropriate paint job that fits our armor. Think of it like a land speeder, only much cheaper. As you can see, the jet bike isn't exactly that large of a vehicle, but that's actually exactly what we want, as we only need just enough room for us, the driver, as well as the corpse of our bounty. Not only is this more practical, but it is much more efficient as well, because the ship takes a lot of fuel going back and forth to orbit. Unfortunately, we can't just cruise around in atmosphere, as it's not really designed for that. Speaking of the ship though, it's time for us to go about making some improvements and expanding it a bit on the front, as we need a place to put our new vehicle, of course. You can consider this something of a hangar bay, even though it is going to be a land vehicle in there. We're just going to be using a garage door made of steel, so it's nice and airtight once we're back in outer space, and also we're just going to use it for some storage. We would end up flying back into orbit though to scout out our next targets, but before we do so, we do need something of a little bit of a nap. Even bounty hunters like myself have to rest from time to time, and a bit of meditation never hurts to clear the mind and put us at ease before a hunt. Cleaning up the planet of crime one step at a time. Some targets were much easier than others, as they didn't really have any weapons or armor. In this case, just no armor. As you can see, we actually got ourselves a pretty sweet plasma rifle. This energy-based weapon is extremely powerful, and that's exactly why we didn't waste any time stabbing its owner to death. We couldn't take any chances of getting shot with it. After entering one of the buildings, we also found plenty of quality hats that we could sell, as well as some gold bars. Off we go to collect more trash. Not all of our targets instantly died after being shot with our new weapon. Some of them hit the ground, like this little Ungoy here, who immediately began begging for his life and pleading. He even offered to join us as a bounty hunter's assistant. Now, normally, something like this, we would just shoot them in the face, but in this particular situation, because he is an Ungoy and they are quite obedient, we actually decided to accept and begin tending to his wounds. We would still need to recruit him, of course, with a little bit of conversation to ensure that he truly is going to join us and not try to double-cross us and stab us in the back. Luckily, though, his threshold to be recruited was very low, and after some time, we had a brand new companion. Looks like we're going to need to test his strategic skills and also battle prowess. We should also probably teach him how to fly the ship in case we get into a hairy situation. Something we wouldn't have to teach him though is how to fight, and that's why on our very next mission, we didn't have to worry about him at all. Yes indeed, Leg the Ungoy could truly hold his own. With a set of crucible pistols, he could do quite a bit of damage. It was also during this particular mission that his crucible pistols, which are not exactly lethal at all times, came in quite handy as the target was downed instead of being killed. Funny enough, we would actually begin tending to her wounds. Normally this isn't something we would worry about, and we would simply step over her and shoot her in the head and then take her corpse in for the reward, but since there are two of us, there's less likely of a chance for anything to go wrong, and we will get a significant boost in our reward. As for her companion though, he could be shot in the head and we wouldn't even think about it. As I was taking the bounty in for our reward, I would leave Leg behind to go about his, well, whatever he's doing. It appears that he's fabricating some type of parts. For the next few days, we would let Leg go about building himself a small little workshop, I suppose you could call it, fabricating more parts and also purchasing some things like advanced components from the nearby Outlanders. And when it was all said and done, he appears to have his very own set of armor. It makes sense since his species is extremely small and fragile during battles that he would want to protect himself, and I think that this mech suit is going to do just that. But as you can also see in this demonstration, it will be extremely useful during battles on missions to hunt down targets, although maybe it is a little bit overkill for that. Thankfully, we had just enough, and I do mean just enough room in our hangar bay for the mech and the jet bike both. Phew, that sure was a lot of work. It takes it out of a fella, I'll tell ya. Before we go on our next mission, we definitely need to get a little bit of rest, especially because our next target is not going to be all that easy. Going by the name of Harmony, the torturous marauders' top man, well, one of their top men, is wanted for piracy and worth about 10,000 silver. Make no mistake, my friends, this is unlike any of our other previous bounty targets with the pirates. Harmony here no doubt has a large arsenal of weaponry, armor, and even augmentations to their body. We were able to detect his location and immediately began coming down from the heavens and landing near this little base. We're quite unsure as to what he's doing here, as he is the top brass for the pirates, but my best guess is that he's been designated to this world to ensure that it has a very large pirate influence. But one thing we do know for sure, he is definitely here, and based on that rocket launcher, he's not messing around. These pirates also appear to have their very own brand of mechanoids. With a spider-like design wielding a large gun on top, it might even manage to give Leg a run for his money in his mech suit. But I suppose we'll have to see. Cautiously, or as cautiously as we could, we began to enter their little settlement here, taking out their defenses as well as making room by destroying their solar panel for our mech to get a good view of them. But all hell was about to break loose. The destructive power of their mechanoids was unmatched. We would have to create several shield barriers to try and stop their explosive power while firing at them and hitting them with every rocket barrage that we possibly could. And even after all that and blowing up half of this entire damn place, their mechs still barely had a scratch on them. Nevertheless, we would not give up, and the ferocious fight would continue to rage. Leg would draw their fire in the mech as Orzo began to take cover behind the shield barriers and buildings when necessary to fire at the enemies. At one point, even getting a direct shot off at Harmony himself. Finally, with one of these theropod mechs down, there was only one more to go, and we too would kill it. But the shields of our own mech was completely broken, and the armor was beginning to fail. As we were returning fire on the absolute Hail Mary of bullets that the pirates were hitting us with, eventually they would attempt to flee. As the other pirates would attempt to flee the area, this was an ample opportunity for us to hunt down Harmony one-on-one. We engaged him in hand-to-hand combat, but unfortunately his sword ended up putting Orzo on the ground, severely injured. Thankfully, Leg was in hot pursuit with the mech suit, firing with the large mech rifle as well as a rocket barrage, finally putting Harmony on his ass. That's right, you son of a bitch. I hope you like pain. There's plenty more where that came from. Leg would begin tending to Orzo's wounds to ensure that he didn't bleed to death, during which time Orzo would actually regain the strength to walk. And with that, finally, justice shall be served. We respect you, pirate, for you have been the toughest hunt yet. But now I shall put you down like the dog that you are. Well, Legs, old buddy, old pal, it looks like we managed to do it somehow. And once we get his body cashed in, we will make a fortune. It must be said, though, that this hunt has cost me more than just time. My body took quite a toll during battle, losing my right eye, my right arm, and even my left leg. So is the life of a bounty hunter. We knew the risk, and the reward is still all that much sweeter. Besides, we can replace them with bionics once we find some. But until then, my friends, I shall continue hunting, and I shall see you next time. Well, looks like we finally made it. The Emperor sent us on a very special mission to a brand new planet, one that is full of Nurgle simps, a disease-ridden hellscape that is chock to the absolute brim of every single corner of this continent with the forces and worshippers of chaos, a true blight and blunder among the stars. Even orbiting above its surface brings me great nausea and disgust, and that is exactly why we'll be taking a page from Void's book and using a planet-destroying weapon against them. Our mission is to drop this precious cargo off on the surface and get the hell out of here before it detonates. Well, that can't be good. Let's see what all the hubbub's about, eh? Oh my god. What the hell is this? A ship? No, a station? So large that it takes up the entire map. Well, it isn't one of ours, that's damn sure, and it isn't Void either. But it is getting closer. So we are gonna have to think fast here and do something about it. But truly, the only thing I think we can do is attempt to retreat. If we don't get the hell out of here ASAP, our cruiser is going to be nothing but dust. Our engines roaring to life to get us to safety. Our shields being bombarded by heavy laser weaponry, easily evaporating away under the sheer force of the station's mighty power. Our hull being thrashed and beaten like a drum. If we could just hold out a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. Well, looks like we made it out in one piece. Or separate pieces, I suppose we should say. But on the bright side, thanks to what is left of this section of the ship, it seems that everyone did make it out without dying or really even all that serious of injuries. No doubt thanks to the tough interior and exterior of the Hammerhead cruiser design. It would appear that our world-ending device has also made it out safe and sound. Luckily, and obviously, because if it detonated, none of us would be here. It also appears that our Battle Brothers section in the control room didn't land anywhere nearby. We can only hope that they made it out alive, and wherever they are, that they're safe. It seems a large battalion of the forces of chaos, plague bearers, and horrors beyond your imagination have our squad pinned down. Vile creatures with a thirst for corruption and blood. But they would not continue to stand against us for long. It's just as the Emperor told us so, and just as we had suspected from orbit, Papa Nurgle has his claws deep into this planet. And it must be eradicated. We would need to begin tending to our wounds. As you saw, they did end up getting the better of us, even if for only a few moments. And the fact that we had sustained quite a few injuries on our impact with the planet didn't help anything anyhow. This part of the ship definitely isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And now that we've had a moment to turn on our transponders, it would seem that we have landed pretty far apart from the other section of the ship with our battle brothers. Speaking Speaking of which, they would begin using some of the excess steel that's lying around on the ground caused by the impact with the ground as well to go about building some power cables, getting the ship's fission reactor connected back up with everything else. Obviously, we're not going to be flying anywhere, but at least this way we have some proper lighting to work on things. And this would also get the ship's weapon systems back online. Now, most of these are not going to be able to attack any ground enemies, but if we have any enemy ships coming from above or transport pods, they should be able to stop them. As for our command center, there was basically nothing here worth keeping, and we wouldn't be able to carry it all, but we also didn't want the enemies to get their hands on the weapon systems or anything like that, so we ended up deconstructing it. And then things like our computer core, as well as advanced components and other things that we could haul with us on our journey, we would end up taking just in case. We would begin making our way south, and we ended up spotting a road not too far away, but we would have to go through enemy territory to get to it. A small camp and or settlement slash town of Nurgle worshipping freaks and what appear to be orcs, but I think they very well may be some type of mangled abominations instead. Either way, chaos worshipping monsters. As we were traveling on the road, we realized the only way to the other side would be to go through their little town here. We decided to cautiously and quietly sneak up to a nearby hill to begin planning our assault. And when the time seemed right, we would strike. We jumped out from around the mountain here and began firing at them. Unfortunately, their forces began to pool up in one large group and begin trying to attack us from the right flank. Our only option would be a strategic retreat to some smaller rock chunks with our backs to a toxic waste lake. I'm afraid that this was our only choice, but after the battle raged on for several hours, we had managed to kill enough of these bastards that they began to flee. While many would end up getting away, some others were not so lucky, like many of those lying on the ground in an injured, incapacitated state who would be slaughtered by us. Ah, yes, combat stims. This would explain how they were fighting so ferociously. These could come in handy for the future. As we began torching the rest of their camp, we decided we should probably search through some of these buildings first, and I'm quite glad we did so as we found a weapons cache. Within, we could find several pathetic feral firearms, but also several chainswords. Hard to say how they got their disgusting little mitts on these, but I'm quite glad that they did, as they'll be very useful for us. Nevertheless, though, we must continue in our journey to make our way towards the other squad. No doubt, though, due to the rudimentary nature of these simple roads, this journey will still take many a day. So, in the meantime, with the secondary squad here, we're going to have to get to work. We immediately began building some smelters with what little bit of steel and components we currently had. That way we could go about smelting down all of these steel slag chunks that fell off of the ship, and thus giving us plenty of resources to work with. In the meantime, our enslaved pirates would also go about repairing what was left of the hull of the ship. And if you can't guess already, the reason that we're doing all this is to try and protect our doomsday device. During our repair efforts, we ended up having a lady wander into the area. Now, at first, we were a little bit worried as we thought that she might alert the locals as to what was going on here, but taking a better look at her, I don't think that she's seen much of anything. We decided that we would speak with her, and upon further inspection, she told us some type of story about how she was here to help us and that she could feel that we needed her assistance as she has some type of healing power. Well, I don't know about you, but to me this sounds like a filthy, warp-loving, chaos-worshipping, degenerate filth. As we murdered her in cold blood, she let out a horrific-sounding scream. It would seem that we were right not to trust her all along, but even in death, she has somehow alerted the Chaos Worshippers and forces of Chaos to our location. Looks like we're gonna have to rush our construction efforts after all. To begin, on the northern point of this section of the ship, we're actually going to begin building some cabins for everyone to sleep in. Now, unfortunately, our slaves do need their own personal personal rooms, otherwise they'll have mental breaks as they don't have the mental fortitude of our clone Marines. Still though, it's nothing too special as we hope to not even be here in a few days when the planet explodes. Finally, utilizing much of the steel that we've been smelting, we would actually begin building on and or repairing this section of the ship to its former glory, although we're not actually building out of ship hull, simply some steel walls that are not near as durable. But the idea is to simply keep enemies from wandering in here and attacking our Doomsday device, as well as any other components that we need, like our fission reactor. Just as well, around the engine bay, we began building some proper defenses. Now we're actually going to build some uranium slug turrets that are meant for out-of-atmosphere combat. They'll be great for air defense, and even if the enemies are at a good distance away, they should help us out quite a bit. The biggest downside, though, is once enemies get too close, they won't be able to fire anymore. Now, this is a very common drawback that is very common in other types of turrets as well, such as our barrage cannon turrets, which if you get too close, they can't fire, but if they catch you at a distance, you might as well just disintegrate yourself because they're going to do it for you. To help counteract these issues with distance, we would also put in several auto cannon turrets as well as mini turrets. And as our resources began to dwindle, this is all we seem to be able to muster in terms of automated defenses, and I think that that was pretty good for what we had. But there was still something pretty crucial missing. A proper shield generator was in order, especially since we had lost our previous one after our little fall from grace. With this, we should be able to easily stop any aerial assaults, as well as any that are outside the shield, even just bullets or rockets or anything they could really throw at us. But with danger quickly approaching on the horizon, no doubt, we decided to go about arming our slaves with our acquired Covenant weaponry. Now, I do realize that arming our enslaved pirates isn't exactly the safest idea, but I'm pretty sure we could take them if they were to rebel, and on the other hand, with how dangerous these chaotic forces are that are attacking us, not only is them being armed their only chance at survival, but it may very well be ours too. But by this point, our food reserves were beginning to get dangerously low, and we were beginning to think that if the other squad didn't make it in time, we might have to try to find a way off this planet without them. But just in the nick of time, speak of the devil, they have finally arrived. I can't tell you how good and reassuring it felt for us all to finally be together once more as a squad, and under the leadership and guidance of our captain once again, no less. Now we just need to get out of here before that happens. Uh-oh. Well, my friends, it would seem that our enemies have brought quite the army for us to battle, consisting of plague bearers wielding large feral machine guns, the feral worshippers themselves, demonic beasts of the warp, and even marines of the Death Guard, Papa Nurgle's prize picks. This will be anything but easy. We would quickly rush to our defensive lines to protect our ship, and together with our automated defenses, we would begin an absolute onslaught of bullets against our enemies. As the rain would fall and dampen the leathery skin of these demonic foes, we would have to engage them in melee combat, ripping them to shreds with our chain swords. Their plague bearers and feral worshippers would mount quite a defense on our right flank, firing at us from each side now. All this while their monstrous marines would attempt to get up close and personal, attacking our pirate slaves. We had been completely surrounded, and we were still trying to hold out as best we can, but their sheer numbers were overwhelming us, and then one of them decided to... Our Marines were becoming severely injured, but this would not stop us from continuing this fight. If we were to die, we will die swinging, by God. In the name of the Emperor, we shall cast our foes into the deepest pit of the abyss, even if it means that we have to go with them. However, luckily, it doesn't seem that that'll be necessary today. Ryan here was the last of our remaining pirate slaves, as the other two unfortunately were killed in the explosion from the plague bearer, so we rushed him inside to tend to his wounds. Even with the majority of the Chaos forces defeated, the battle still raged on as we had several plague bearers and other demonic forces in the area. All the while, we were attempting to stop a large fire from detonating our world-ending device. But as we were distracted, our enemies would make their way inside our ship to attack the device as well as our Marines. We had to do something to stop them and to cast them out. As the captain and the others began rushing to the area to reinforce them, something a bit surprising happened. One of the plague Marines came back to life. I suppose Nurgle has a stranglehold over them even in their final death. Perhaps even more surprising, though, is the fact that Ryan here, even after being severely injured, took up arms once more to help out his captors. But after once more clearing out the ship and putting out the fires, we were victorious. The massive onslaught of Chaos forces were defeated, and we were free to destroy this planet, to cleanse it of these disgusting parasites. Though, even with our victory, there was still much sacrifice. Our brother Booth had been killed during the battle, his armor completely shredded by countless hours of fighting, and it had eventually succumbed, and as did he. He was our brother, he was our friend, and he was a damn fine soldier, a true warrior of the Empire. Given the circumstances, the best that we could do for him was to dig a hole and to bury him properly. But we would have no time to mourn his death, as within about a day or so, this heavenly body was going to be nothing but space dust. So we immediately began deconstructing portions of the starship that we could. That way we could go about building ourselves a small but fast and very agile corvette. It wasn't much, but it would get us off the planet in time. Unfortunately, this does also mean that we'll have to leave the majority of our resources, weapons, and everything else behind. But perhaps we could get some use out of them before we left. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You know just as well as I know that we made some large nuclear warheads, and plenty of them, I might add. And with that, my friends, we're off. Finally, once again in orbit around the planet, but we couldn't just up and leave this system so soon, as we still had one gigantic threat left to deal with. Chances are, if we don't stop that massive space station, they'll probably stop the planet from being destroyed, and even if they don't, once this planet is destroyed, they'll just move on to the next. So using our small and agile corvette, we would begin making our way there. Immediately upon our arrival, just on the outside of this station shell, we could hear a grand, muffled battle taking place on the interior. Utilizing our weapons to attack the airlocks, we would begin making our way inside. At which time, we witnessed the ship's mechanoid defense force attacking what appeared to be several horrific figures. Oddly enough, during this battle, I witnessed that many of the feral forces were unable to control their shambler monsters that they had created. Nevertheless, if I had to guess, I would say that the forces of Chaos have taken over this station, and its security forces are now beginning to fight back. Lucky for the mechanoids, reinforcements have arrived, but unfortunately for us, they were none too pleased to have our help. Oh well, I suppose we're just going to have to kill everyone then instead. No doubt this station's going to be extremely difficult to navigate, especially with all these warring factions, so we decided to drop a nuclear warhead to clear them out a little bit. To our shock and horror, the ship's Archotech structure could easily contain even a nuclear warhead's blast, simply destroying the smaller hull. If we plan on destroying this ship, it looks like we're going to have to find another way to go about doing it. But we would continue making our way through the station, fighting tooth and nail for every single inch that we took. By this point, our pirate slave Ryan was severely injured, and to be honest with you, it's a miracle he survived this long, so we decided to let him hang back, tend to his wounds in a safe area, and then get back in the ship so he could have it ready for our grand escape. But as our squad of brothers would continue continue pushing through the station, eventually we would end up finding one of the antimatter reactors. Chances are there's probably quite a few of these on the station. If we could manage to get them to go boom, the station would follow suit, no doubt. We would leave Jam and Moggy behind to attack the reactor and get it down to just enough health before it exploded, while the others would continue. Eventually, Collins and the captain would make their way to the center of the station, the control room. Within this room, there was essentially a full war going on between the Ferals, Forces of Chaos, and of course the Mechanoids attempting to defend their station, and we even spotted quite a few Plague Marines, one of which just so happened to be the infamous Ox. The Empire and even the Emperor has a very long history with him, and he is very, very dangerous. So naturally, to test ourselves, we decided to attack him and his entourage head on. Blaster bolts, bullets, and everything and anything in between flying by our heads as our chain swords clashed in a mighty fight. This bastard has evaded the Empire for far too long. Once finished up with the reactors, Jam and Moggy would then enter the control room, where they would also end up finding several Archotech computers and drone cores that were keeping the station afloat. We could try to hack them to take over the station, but that would take far too long. A much better plan would be to destroy these damn dirty machines, and that way we could sink this ship. Utilizing our blasters and even our swords, that's exactly what we began doing, shredding every single component of these machines. And with that, the engines began to fail. The station was about to fall back into the planet's atmosphere and be ripped to shreds, and to be destroyed once our doomsday device goes off. Now, the only thing left for us to do was to get the hell out of here before it all went down. I managed to get Ryan, Moggy, and Jam all back out to the Corvette, but I'm afraid for Collins and even the captain himself, it may be too late. Locked in a brutal stalemate with the Plague Marine Ox, I'm afraid that the captain would turn off his transponder. The team knew what they had to do. It was time for them to leave. The captain would be staying right here. Critically damaged, the antimatter reactors began spewing geysers of flames as they were overheating. It eventually came to a boiling point. The station would implode in on itself and begin descending towards the planet, but it would never hit the surface. Our mission was a complete and utter success, at the cost of the lives of 2 of our battle brothers and our captain. True heroes of the Empire, and even our pirate slave Ryan didn't do too bad himself. Perhaps a promotion is in order. They say clones are expendable, but I think they're heroes. Hello, welcome back to the rootinest, tootinest bounty hunting series that you have ever seen. Last episode, we hunted down plenty of folks, including pirates and even one of their bigwigs by the name of Harmony. And that's why today's episode, we're going to begin by taking his corpse back down to the planet's surface to get our reward. This money is going to be absolutely crucial to us upgrading all of our weapons, armor, and even our ship. But it'll also be so much silver that we could throw it in a pile and roll around in it if we wanted to. Upon touching down in the region, we thought that this might actually be a pretty ample place to set up shop just for a little while as a temporary camp or something. First order of business though is going to be loading up that sorry ass dead pirate onto our jet bike and taking him off to get our warrant reward. Thankfully, it wouldn't take us very long at all to arrive at the Junkers settlement, the ones who were paying out the reward for his deceased corpse. And in the meantime, while Orzo was traveling to get their reward, reward money, we would have Legs begin digging into this calcified junk pile to find any type of useful items such as plasteel chunks, steel chunks, plasma cartridges, you name it, we could probably find it here in the trash. Some odd hours later, Orzo would finally return home with all 10,000 pieces of our reward silver, and then immediately begin helping Legs do a bit of mining with the calcified junk and trash, but also with some steel as well. We're going to try to begin collecting plenty of resources so that we can go about making proper additions onto our ship and upgrades. Plasteel is a pretty hot commodity when it comes to upgrading ships like this, so we're also going to build a smelter and dig all the plasteel chunks out of this calcified trash that we can. That way, well, we can smelt it and have it ready for the ship. However, since it seems like we're going to be here for quite some time to go about doing this, to set up a proper little camp, we also would begin cutting down plenty of cacti and trees in the area for wood. We're going to use this wood to set up some very simple wooden shelters out here in the desert to keep the elements off of our backs, even though our backs are quite well armored, but we're also going to be using it to build some proper storage shelves for all of our money and any of our weapons and anything else that doesn't fit in the ship at this moment. The problem is, most of what we have right now that won't fit onto the ship is our money, and I know what you're thinking, it's probably not a good idea to keep our money outside lying around like this, and you might be right. It would seem that some raiders thought the exact same thing and are now here to try to kill us and also steal it. It would appear to be a Gerald Hanai bandit, an Imperial veteran who has turned bandit, and their construction mechanoid. Legs would immediately rush into his mech and come out to help Orzo fight off the incoming threat. Since we're slightly outnumbered, I think that this will help us even the odds just a little bit, eh? We began with a couple of rocket barrages at the filthy Imperial bandit, before trying to rip the CPU straight out of their mechanoid with our bare mechanical hands. However, a teeny tiny problem arose as we were battling in the mech. The battery got dangerously low and it was about to run out of power, which would have left us stranded out there being shot at, so Legs had to ditch it for the time being. But our enemies were still laying down very heavy fire, bullets and blaster bolts whizzing by our heads. Orzo chucked down his bayoneted charge rifle so that Legs could grab it, and the two of them would have a range advantage on our enemies. We immediately rushed to a nearby deposit of calcified junk and trash to begin using its pillars of garbage as cover. After a bit of a brief firefight, we were victorious finally. Ah, you poor dumb fool. To think many years ago you and I would have been battle brothers fighting off the forces of darkness from the Empire. How the tables have turned. We just took two totally different paths, I suppose. Now normally we would just go ahead and finish off any bandits or pirates that had tried to kill us like this, but this particular Imperial veteran pirate actually had a bionic arm, which would be perfect to replace the one we lost last episode. So instead, I think I will try to begin tending to her wounds. We'll take her in and make her nice and comfy, and once she's finally healed up from all of her injuries, we may begin to try to remove it. In the meantime, we need to make this temporary house a true home by improving the flooring of our little makeshift prison cell, as well as improving our power production, which we currently don't have any of except from the ship, of course, and we would also go about making sure it was well defended with a proper high security fence. Not exactly the most well secured camp, but it'll do for now. We were also running dangerously low on food, to the point that we had actually accidentally fed the Imperial bandit one of her companions' corpses, which is pretty cruel in my opinion, so I immediately went out and began hunting down some local wildlife. Not only because it wasn't right of us to feed her corpses, especially those of her fallen comrades, but also because we don't want to have to start doing the same. I think dromedary steaks are a much better alternative. After a few days though, once the bandit was finally healed from her little thrashing from us, we decided to go about removing her bionic arm, though this ended up failing, and we would end up trying a second time, which also ended up failing, unfortunately. Each failed attempt causing her much distress and much pain, I'm afraid. Well, because we're bounty hunters and not torturers, we decided to take her out on a little journey to some junkers and outlanders to see if anyone would pay a good little bounty for her head, since she is technically a bandit. Funny enough, the outlanders of the area were willing to pay just under 700 silver for her head, and they even had a bionic field arm. The field arm isn't exactly the same as a normal bionic arm, as it's mostly just used for farmers and people like that who are sowing and harvesting crops, but to be honest with you, it's better than nothing. Plus, it was cheaper than a normal bionic arm, even though we didn't find one to purchase, and regardless of its intended purpose as a farming bionic arm, it actually gives us a much higher manipulation than a normal arm, so a win-win. We could already see a massive difference in smelting plasteel and other duties that we were currently doing around our little camp. Now, if only we could find a bionic leg to replace our lost leg, we could probably move around a lot faster grabbing these chunks to smelt them. But after many days of smelting and mining and deconstructing, we finally had enough resources to go about making some proper additions onto our ship. Completely expanding our front section, even adding in 2 bedrooms, one for each of our little crew members here, our bounty hunters, as they haven't even had their own bedrooms on the ship this entire time and have been sleeping in the control room. We would also add in some additional space for storage. This way, our hangar bay here is mostly solely going to be for our vehicles and our mech suit. Although that's a lie, because we're also going to be storing things in there as well, and by the time it was all said and done, we finally had our expansion of the ship done, making it look a bit more phallic. A large portion of our new storage room was going to include a mech hangar bay though, that way we could actually charge our mech back up to full capacity. Now this does take up a lot of power, but you'll also notice on the sides that we also have plenty more solar panels sticking out of the ship as well, so we should be good. Now it was time for us to take down our temporary camp and begin hauling in all of the useful resources that we want to continue taking with us on our journey, such as all of our money, of course. And with that, we can finally return to our home in the heavens orbiting the planet before we begin hunting more targets. All that hard work on the surface, though, I think we've earned ourselves something of a nap, wouldn't you say, Legs, old buddy, old pal? Ah, yes, from up here, the world was our oyster, our playground, and most importantly, ours for the taking. Our little piggy bank, if you will. Ah, yes, and I think that I've spotted our very next deposit. It looks like this fella is wanted for embezzlement. Ah, yes, I'm sure with armor like that, he's been embezzling quite a bit. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that we'll be able to take him dead, and we'll have to take him alive. Set phasers for stun, Legs. This won't be as fun as we'd hoped. They said we had to take the target alive for the reward, but his companion here, well... As for the target, Legs would try to jump up right next to him with the old combat knife and start poking him in the ribs a little bit, as Legs would come up behind him and start blasting him in the back of the head with a non-lethal blast, I hope. Eventually, though, we would end up taking him alive, though he was badly bruised and beaten, as I'm sure you could imagine. Orzo would rush him off on the jet bike to try and collect our warrant before he may have ended up bleeding to death, who knows. But in the meantime, Legs would actually pick up his interesting weapon here. This, my friends, is a plasma cannon. As an ex-grunt in the Covenant forces, of course Legs is quite familiar with plasma tech, and thus he knew exactly how to go about using it. Yes, indeed, I think that this will come in quite handy. Our next target was wanted for larceny, and though we would end up making a good bit money more on him if we were to take him alive, that's not exactly our style now, is it? Especially not when testing out our new cannon. We may have found our new favorite weapon for these hunts. I do notice, however, that many of the larger warrants seem to have already been fulfilled by us, and we're really dealing with the small potatoes now. So, we began building a radio terminal inside the ship so that we could communicate with some traders as well as the orbital traders hub, and we can actually begin selling off many different items that we're collecting from these hunts, as well as the junk piles that we've been mining out. This would also allow us to go about purchasing a few things that we needed, such as a bionic leg. We would also end up getting ourselves a bit of glitter world medicine, that way we could ensure that the surgery is up to par and that we don't have any complications. We equipped Orzo's room into a simple surgery room with the operating table and everything that we saved on the surface, and the surgery went off without a hitch, just as we had hoped. It would seem that I'm almost whole again. I'm still missing my right eye, but I'm sure we'll come across a nice bionic eye or something in the very near future, perhaps even a recon eye, which is a bit better for our occupation. Now that we can move around and manipulate items much better, we decided to make a few more upgrades to the ship. I noticed that we have a severe lack of heating and cooling, as well as weapons. These small uranium slug turrets won't be able to do much of anything, to be honest, but they're better than no defenses at all. And then after that, when checking warrants in the system, we ended up coming across the Holy Grail. kill yet another torturous marauder pirate. Going by the name of Smoke, he was actually worth 15,000 silver, 5,000 more than his companion Harmony, who we had taken in last episode. Just what we had been hoping for. This hunt was going to be a little bit different though, it would seem, as Smoke wasn't just hiding out in some torturous marauder base on the planet, he had actually landed a ship nearby. Just off the shoreline, a very large ship with a very large entourage of dangerous and deadly pirates. Backing them up were reinforcements of gigantic mechanoids, with large cannons built into their exoframes and one even wielding a large Gauss cannon. It would appear that we're going to have our work cut out for us. If I had to guess, I would say that they've landed here looking for some type of shipment delivery that they could take back into orbit and thus out of this system. Of course, we don't plan on letting them make it that far though. We ended up landing our ship just a few clicks to the east away from where they've landed their own. No doubt they've already detected us in the nearby area, but I highly doubt that they would leave their post and their ship unattended to try and attack us. Which means that we have the upper hand, the element of surprise. Landing our ship too close to theirs would surely be a death sentence for it, if not for it and us, as our weapons surely cannot compare to their own. And thus why we've decided to come into the region via on foot and or jet bike and mech. The idea here is going to be for Orzo to sneak around the western side of this area on the bike, although it'd be quite loud. I don't think that they'll suspect much, and he's going to try to come up around the side of their ship. In the meantime, Legs in his mech suit would sneak up around a small hill near the ship and then begin attacking the pirates. Not only to try and kill as many as we possibly could, of course, but because we've learned our lesson from the last attack against these pirates. Attacking them head on the entire time is a fool's game, and that's why Orzo is going to infiltrate their ship, killing any pirate security he sees along the way, of course. Since Legs is outside taking on the main group all by himself, they'll never be able to get any help on the inside. Meaning, of course, that Orzo will essentially have free roam around the ship once he finishes off the security forces, which also means that he'll make it into the control room and will be able to use the ship's defenses against the crew. Fighting fire with fire, as they say. This would severely weaken their mechanoid forces, as well as killing many of the pirate entourage themselves, giving Legs in his mech suit a real advantage against them, making finishing off what was left of their forces and their mechanical minions nothing but child's play. Ah, Smoke, you're just the same as the rest of them, devious, sly, and even dangerous, but what you lack is resolve. You lack honor, and for that, I must sentence you to death. Trust me, the world is a better place without you. Well, now that there are no more pirates, I suppose the question should be posed, what do we do with a pirate vessel, especially one of this size? There's no salvage yard on this planet that isn't under control of the Federation that would be willing to take it for some silver, so I suppose we could keep it. Legs in his mech suit would begin making the journey back on foot to our ship, where he would actually pilot it and take it back into orbit around the planet where it rightfully belongs. While Orzo, commandeering the pirate vessel, would end up doing the same, rendezvousing in orbit with our own ship. Based on the size and design of this pirate vessel, if I had to guess, I would say that it's some type of modified trade ship. It's still quite unknown to us as to what they planned on doing with it here on the planet, but I think it would be great for possibly hauling around large amounts of cargo as well as possible bounty targets. It could be exactly what we need to take our business to the intergalactic scale, if you catch my drift. You see, this bad mamma jamma has its very own warp drive, meaning that we're not going to be regulated to doing our bounty hunting business in this solar system, or realistically even this star system anymore. Speaking of which, we do currently still have the business of taking Smoke's decomposing corpse down to the surface for our reward, which we would quickly end up doing, and the Junkers being the arch nemesis of the torturous marauders in this system system would pay a handsome fortune, as they promised. But as it currently stands, it doesn't look like we have many warrants posted in the system for this planet, so perhaps moving on is going to be a good idea. But maybe in the meantime, we give it some time to populate with some possible bounties, and we begin working on our ships instead. We actually began cutting in half our ship that we've created and adding it onto the front of this pirate vessel. The reason being, we only have 2 crewmates, Legs and myself, and to be honest with you, it would be extremely impractical if we had 2 separate ships, especially given the size difference between the 2 of them, so in my opinion it only made sense for us to add ours onto this one. So, utilizing what resources we currently had in storage, as well as the resources that we ended up getting from deconstructing our vessel, we would end up beefing it up a little bit as well. That way we can ensure if we got into combat in space, it wouldn't immediately be cut in half by lasers or plasma weapons. And with that, for the time being, our bounty hunting vessel is complete, although it does still need a name, which I'm sure you fine folks wouldn't mind helping me out with, would you? If you'd like to leave some name suggestions in the comment section down below, I would very much appreciate it. In the previous episode, I had said that we were finally going pro. We were going to be in the big leagues of bounty hunting when we built our very first ship, but now I think that that statement truly is, well, true. This ship will be able to hold up to several bounty targets all at the same time, which will make us a filthy fortune, but I think that we may need some more crew. We also need a quick, easy, and efficient way to go about interacting with the planet's surface, so we've actually created a shuttle that can enter and exit atmosphere to return home. For example, loading up over 20,000 pieces of silver into it and having it go down to do a bit of trading. We're going to be on the lookout for any bounty hunters like ourselves that may want to join our ranks. I feel that it's only common sense that we would have a crew aboard our ship that has similar interests and goals in mind. We would end up coming across an Imperial veteran who used to be a Janissary who goes by the name of Lester. No doubt he has the experience that we're looking for, though he seems to be a hired gun, which means that for 6,203 silver, he would join our crew. We forked over the cash, accepted, and we took him aboard in our shuttle and began heading back to the old mothership. Upon our return, you'll also notice that not only did we hire Lester, but we also purchased many different types of resources like steel, plasteel components, advanced components, yada yada yada, some armor for Lester, and many other things. Of course, though, just because we paid him doesn't mean we could trust him, so Legs and Orzo would begin something of an interrogation and a conversation with him to entrust that they could, well, trust him. Orzo, being a veteran of the old empire himself, they had a lot in common, but Orzo knows better than to just trust people based on similar experience, you could say. I mean, think of all the times in this series alone that another Imperial has tried to kill us. However, trust is indeed something that is earned through different types of means, such as working together on improving the ship with all the new resources that we've acquired. We're going to begin creating some more weapons, such as lasers, and also some large coolant tanks to help us ensure that our shields don't burst immediately after getting shot at, of course. And I hope that all these new defenses and improvements are well worth it, because we essentially spent all of our bounty money on it. However, of course, you could consider this just investing in our business, right? You have to spend a little bit of capital to make a little bit of capital as well, of course. Improving the ship not only ensures our survival that much more so, but it also ensures that we'll be able to continue hunting down bounties without issue. We would also end up removing the black and red pirate paint from our ship to avoid preemptive conflicts. That way, governments of planets and star systems don't try to shoot us down out of orbit and destroy us just solely based on how we look. However, we did feel that the red paint was still pretty fitting given our occupation, and thus we decided to leave it. But with all that work completed, it is time for us to begin making money once more. We have a target that is wanted for extortion, and thus because of this, there is no reward if we kill them, which is a bit boring, but nevertheless, it is money. Spending this time together has had us begin to trust Lester quite a bit, so we would allow him to take over flight of the ship while we went down to the planet's surface to take care of our new bounty target. We plan on flying down in the cover of night. As you can see, our little shuttle is a bit of a darker red, so they'd never even see us coming. They too appear to be some type of Imperial remnants, though I can't be sure what the target's rank and or noble title might have been, if any at all, although it does seem that they do have a Janissary personal guard along with him. Orzo, using his jump pack, would leap into action and began attempting to stab the target as legs killed the guard. The target's plasma cleaver did a good bit of damage to us, but luckily after a few shots we managed to take them down before they could get another hit or two in with it. And with that, it was time for us to begin tending to his wounds to ensure that he doesn't bleed to death before we get our money's worth out of his little ass. His personal guard, however, yeah. We would finally return home with all of our winnings, as well as a few weapons and other things that we got from their camp, such as some meals and spacer med packs, and also, most importantly, a very interesting item known as a Resurrector Mech Serum. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what this item does, if one of us were to die, the other could technically and theoretically use this to pull us back from the icy, gripping hands of death himself into the living world. Though, based on the planetary system, it doesn't look like we're going to be facing death or the possibility of death anytime soon, as it doesn't seem like we have any interesting warrants that would actually be paying any decent silver. Unless we wanted to hunt down some wild animals for scraps of silver, but where's the justice? Where's the fun in that? The lack of warrants, accompanied with the fact that it seems that the organization known as Void is taking a massive foothold in our home planet here and is fighting the Federation, who will most likely soon collapse. All this to say that I think that our job here at home is done, and that maybe we should use our warp drive to discover some other star systems in the galaxy where our business can flourish and thrive. Of course though, to go about doing so, we will need to activate the ship's built-in AI computer core, perhaps even giving it a form gel form, that way it feels more natural to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Charlene, the brains of our ship. At first, we were a little bit worried since this was a pirate vessel, but Charlene had confirmed our suspicions, stating that it was originally a transport ship for traders, and thus of course he harbors no ill will towards us. After explaining to Charlene that we are the ones who have been hunting down the pirates for a little bit of cash and the rewards that they offer for them, he seemed pretty content to stay along with us for the ride. But before we go into hyperspace, we do need to jump into our cryo sleep pods, at least for the initial jump, otherwise our internal organs may be pulled into the outside, which is obviously not good. And with that, my friends, we shall bid farewell to our home planet one last final time. The ether and the abyss of space calls to us, it beckons for us, and thus we must answer its call. Into new horizons we go. Odd. I wonder what that could be. This poor chap's body is completely shredded. Well, he doesn't look like a Federation soldier or a Void associate, so I guess we could use our serum on him. Hello, one and all. Welcome back to the most bountiful bounty hunting series in RimWorld that you have ever laid eyes upon. Last episode, we got ourselves a great big ship, and after we entered hyperspace, we ended up finding an injured companion. This handsome gentleman claims to be some type of captain of an Imperial squad, though he doesn't look like any type of Imperial soldier we've ever seen. Nevertheless, we decided to bring him to one of his Empire's controlled worlds, as he said that it is sure to be rife and jam-packed with bounty targets and criminals for us to hunt for profit. So obviously, as one might expect, we accepted. But first, we're going to take him down to the planet's surface and drop him off at a nearby city. We're going to let him call ahead of time so they don't start trying to blast us out of orbit, of course. Reason being is, even though he is a captain, we don't need him getting into our bounty hunting affairs or even getting in the way. I'm guessing that their colonization of this planet is still fairly recent, as this isn't much of a city at all. But as we began to approach with our new companion to drop him off, I realized that this place seems to be more of a resource depot and or little mining town. So I suppose that would explain the less than average size of it. Upon further inspection of the locals and their guards, this is not the same empire that we had served under hundreds of years ago. The captain describes these soldiers as the perfect specimens, the perfect killing machines. Apparently, they are all clones. Quite interesting, I'll say, although we're a bit more worried about our own business on the planet, so we would bid the captain farewell. Hopefully he stays out of trouble this time, like getting killed by chaotic forces that are beyond human comprehension. Back into orbit we go, though, around the planet. That way we can connect and survey this planetary warrant system to look for our next bounty target. But first, for the heroic mission of rescuing the captain, I think we've earned ourselves a nice beverage. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's get back to work. It's time for us to make the bacon, baby. Let's see, what do we have here? Ah, yes, perfect. Cyber crimes, eh? And it looks like this new empire is going to pay a fortune for your pretty little head. Though, it does seem like we're going to make more money if we keep her alive, so we'll see what we can do, no promises. Even from above, as we were coming into land, we could see that the criminal organizations around these parts are much larger, with many more criminals. With the group of our enemies being this large, it's a good thing that old Legs here brought his plasma cannon. It tends to make pretty quick work of the small, soft, and squishy enemies, leaving the harder and more fun ones for later. After seeing many of their friends turned into red mist with a hint of blue plasma, most of these criminals decided to flee. A great idea, we commend them for their critical thinking skills. This also gave us the perfect opportunity to beat our target into submission with our weapons instead of killing her, which means that we're going to make oodles upon oodles of moolah. Well, as long as she doesn't bleed to death, that is, but luckily most of these are just bruises from our bionic arms beating her in the head. We would take her to the nearest imperial town to collect our reward. But not only her, we had also brought a couple of her cohorts who hadn't bled to death along with us to sell to the Empire as well. Now returning back home with all of our silver, food, and everything else that we collected from their camp, which was ranging from some large hand cannon weapons, laser swords, to some beautiful decorative eggs. Actually, we might be able to eat those too. But after dinner, we had our very next cyber criminal, it would seem, though they are paying quite a bit less for him for whatever reason. It seems that he has some very unique looking armor, similar to that of the captain. I'm sure this will be a cakewalk. What's the worst that could happen? This fight would be much of the same. Many of the same band of criminals that was protecting the last cyber criminal appears to be protecting this one. They're probably in cahoots. However, Legs was severely injured during this battle. We had no time to rescue him and only enough time to pick up his plasma cannon to try and protect him and ourselves. We were making very quick work of the criminals, maybe a little too quick of work, as they began to flee the area, including our target. In a desperate attempt to try and stop this at any cost, we used our jump pack to jump right next to him and begin trying to stab him with our combat knife, but his armor was far too durable. We wouldn't even make a scratch on it. Hoping to get enough distance between us to use our plasma cannon, he ended up escaping, unfortunately. On the bright side, we were able to return to Legs in time and begin tending to his wounds to ensure that our little pal here didn't end up dying, but this marked the second time in the entire series that we've let a target get away, and we almost lost Legs in the process. I think we've become far too content with how things were on the old world and hunting down our old targets who didn't have near as many reinforcements. We've become lazy and soft. we need to switch things up a little bit. And that's exactly why we're going to do a little bit of trading with an orbital combat supplier. We're actually going to be selling them many of the weapons that we've been collecting in exchange for some new, more interesting, powerful weapons. These new rifles will now belong to Lester, who is also going to be part of our bounty hunting squad. No more just staying on the ship and helping out with day-to-day operations and staying in orbit and flight patterns and all that boring shit. It's time to get down and dirty. The only issue that we're currently facing is the fact that our shuttle can only carry 2 people as it stands, so we're going to be doing a bit of an upgrade so that we can carry more people, and thus Lester can join us on our hunting ventures. Now, those of you with a keen memory are probably asking yourself, why didn't we just have Legs go down in his massive mech suit, as that would have probably made some pretty quick work of our enemies? Well, unfortunately, all of our ship destroying and building and adding onto this ship and using a shuttle has left us without a vessel that can carry the mech suit. Just for now, that is. We're going to need to collect quite a few resources before we can build a shuttle that is large enough to go about carrying the mech suit and our hunters up and down from the planet's surface back into orbit, as it's quite the journey. So in the meantime, I think we'll go about doing some more hunting. Now, this fella here in a war casket is wanted for other crimes. I suppose those are some that are so horrific that they don't even want to mention them. Our hunting trio would immediately touch down just in front of the cave system where these poor cowards have been hiding and start annihilating every single criminal that we came upon. So much for taking them alive, I suppose, except maybe one of them. But the target? Yeah, no, he's dead. He's been dead for quite a while. On to our next hunt. I wish I could say that this was any different than the last hunt, but unfortunately for these poor dumb bastards, they were just as squishy and weak as ever. It would seem that with 3 of us, we have achieved a new bounty hunting record. By killing them as quickly as possible, I mean. And of course, now it's time for us to head off and collect our reward for our targets, but after that, we thought it might be a good idea to do a little bit of trading, and thus we would end up purchasing a hauler for the ship. Think of it like a lifter mechanoid, except it can actually fly around, and it is much, much faster, with a decrease in how much it can carry, of course. After that, we would actually call up the Orbital Traders Hub to request a bulk goods trader a few days later. That way we could go about purchasing plenty of steel, plasteel components, advanced components, yada yada yada, essentially all of the resources that we need for our little project we were talking about earlier. In with the new and out with the old, we are deconstructing our old shuttle bay along with our old teeny tiny shuttle and replacing it with a large shuttle bay and a super heavy shuttle. Quite literally the largest shuttle that we could create, with the largest hauling capacity, of course. And to ensure that it could do exactly what we needed it to, we would have Legs jump into his mech suit and then jump into the cargo section of the shuttle, and yeah, he fits, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted. Uh-oh, looks like we have some visitors. Not exactly sure what faction is controlling that little bad boy, but it doesn't seem to be the torturous marauders, so I'm guessing it has something to do with these cyber criminals we've been bringing to justice. We began evasive maneuvers to try and avoid enemy attacks, but also to put some distance between our ship and theirs, giving Legs perfect opportunity to take out the new shuttle in his mech suit. Once that was completed, it was time for us to begin fighting back. Of course, though, we'll need to ensure that we do our best not to strike our own shuttle and kill poor old Legs. As soon as he touched down just on the outside of their airlocks, he immediately began bombarding their crew with missiles, rockets, and anything and everything he could, making extremely quick work of them all. As he was doing this, our weapon systems were absolutely tearing their Corvette apart. First, we began with their engines, completely destroying them, preventing the enemy ship from leaving, and then we began attempting to slice it in half with our lasers and plasma. By this point, Legs had made his way inside the ship, using his shock attack to stun and incapacitate enemies, and once we got to the shield generator, we felt like we'd done enough damage. It was time for us to return home. We'll leave these poor saps here to bleed to death, or to suffocate to death in the vacuum of space. And with that in our wake, we leave behind a gigantic wreckage with plenty of rubble and resources, Initially, I thought maybe we would just leave it behind and let it burn up in the planet's atmosphere, but after returning home and then taking our mech to its bay to charge, I realized that the frontal portion of our ship had basically been destroyed. So, instead of actually letting it burn up in the atmosphere, it would probably be better if we brought it here with our salvage bay and then began deconstructing it for resources. Not only would these resources be absolutely perfect for repairing the frontal portion of our ship, but they would actually be perfect for any more shuttles, shuttle bays, or just basically any other construction projects that we had in mind, and we did indeed have quite a few in mind. If worse came to worse though, we could always sell it for plenty of money as well, and basically you get what I'm saying. It's always good to have plenty of resources, especially when it comes to stuff like plasteel. But now with the frontal portion of the ship finally repaired, it was time for us to take on a new construction project. Now in the center section of our ship, we're actually going to be building some hull plating as well as hull around these areas with our cryosleep caskets. The reason being is that we don't want our ship to be cut in half, and these small portions of hull connecting up all these egg-shaped areas is in big danger of basically being torn apart, and that would be no bueno, obviously. I do realize though that these areas are a bit oddly shaped even after building the hull like this, and because of that there's not really much we could put in here unless we did some bedrooms or something, maybe some prison rooms, but for now we're going to be using it as backup storage. Besides, we still need a place to put all the remaining resources that we've acquired from the wreckage, and I can't think of anywhere better than the new additional areas for storage. But enough with the construction and the hauling, by God, it's time for us to do a little bounty hunting. That's what we're here for, isn't it? Yes, indeed I believe it is. We've got a damn dirty kidnapper in some very similar armor to the cyber criminal from earlier, so here's hoping that we stand a chance against him with our weapons. No doubt we were striking fear in their hearts with our brand new massive ship that we came in on, and eventually we would chase down the target and oh, he's dead. Well, now that was much easier than we had anticipated. Easy money, baby, easy money. Well, now it's time for us to go out and collect our reward from an imperial city, but you know what? I think it's time for us to go about celebrating a little bit as well. Ah yes, the beautiful jungle city. Now it's time to see if they have a place so we can wet our whistles. Ah, a bar, just my kind of spot. I'll go in while Legs stands guard outside in the mech suit just in case there's any trouble. This place was bumpin'. We came straight up to the bar and ordered a fine glass of the tallest. But now with my thirst quenched, I really wanted to gamble a little bit. As I approached the poker table, however, I recognized a familiar face. The captain that we had rescued. I suppose it is such a small world after all, eh, Captain? We had a bit of a brief conversation where he congratulated me on my efforts to clean up the planet with our bounty hunting. Apparently, we're becoming quite famous here as well. Little does he know we're not doing it for the fame, but simply for the money. Either way, though, he said that there might be a possibility in our future to work with his emperor and their empire full time. Some steady work like that for a government is something that we would be interested in most definitely, but he also told us about something else. The organization known as Void has begun setting up footholds here on this planet, as they do with many other planets controlled by the Clone Empire. Not to worry though, as I think their armies can handle this. Yeah, I think that they probably have it covered. But the captain didn't tell us about their presence on the planet so that we could help out in an all-scale invasion against one of their bases. No, he told us about it because there are sure to be plenty of bounty targets, such as good old Toxin here. Now, Toxin is the type of associate that the organization will send to a planet preemptively to begin prepping it for their arrival. So in other words, he doesn't hide at the bases, he's the one that helps set them up initially. And more importantly, he is worth a lot of money. But taking on a foe like this is going to be absolutely insane. So before we do that, I'm going to do a little bit of trading to fix my eye by purchasing an Archotech eye. This might seem a bit silly, but we are going to need all the help that we can get, and that does include having sight in both of my eye sockets preferably. God forbid we miss when shooting at a Void Associate like Toxin, because if we do, we might not get another shot. After receiving intel from the Empire, we were able to track down his location, and we plan on bringing our entire ship on this hunt with us. Not only are we going to need all the firepower from our crew, but even from our vessel itself. This is the furthest thing from a small task. After landing, our sensors immediately picked up our target and his entourage of Void Associates and bodyguards. There were more of them than we had initially anticipated. One Void Associate is hard enough, let alone 5 or 6. But without hesitation, we let her rip. We had managed to kill some of them, but our target was still at large, and now he was far too close for our weapons to take him out, and worst of all, he was about to breach our hull. Orzo would attempt to confront him with the plasma cannon, missing the first shot, but even after getting a good shot or two in at him and his associate, we realized just how tough these bastards really were, tanking everything we were throwing at them. Lester would attempt to help us with his plasma blade, but he was quickly decapitated by Toxin. Legs rushing to his mech suit to try and reinforce us as best that he could. In the meantime, we were trying to get the hell away from these bastards before we ended up like Lester. Thankfully, they were a little bit too preoccupied with our ship's defenses, like our laser turrets, to notice. But they also ended up noticing our hauler drone and swatted it out of the air, destroying it. Legs had finally made his way outside the ship and squeezing his mech barely just through the hole that they had made in the hull to help us out. Striking them with missile barrages, we had finally taken out one of the associates, but Toxin was still standing. Thanks to our shield barrier, he couldn't even touch us, as long as it lasted, that is. Luckily, after firing at him for several moments, he eventually would catch on fire, and then we actually lost track of him. We could no longer find him anywhere inside the ship, and after putting out the fires that had been started, I realized that he had actually burned to death. And with his charred corpse lying next to our shelves, this battle was finally over. We need to get him off the ship ASAP and take him in for our reward before he revives, because sometimes that happens, and I don't think we could kill him again, to be honest with you. Needless to say, the captain was quite pleased with our efforts. Compared to what the clone army is doing on the planet against the organization, it may not seem like much, but folks like Toxin here are vital to their operations, and thus we have done the Empire a great service. Before leaving, as part of our reward, the captain actually gave us a gift, an urn for the ashes and remains of our poor sweet friend Lester. Lester went out just as many bounty hunters do, for the life of a hunter is not one of ease. Lester knew this just as well as we all do. His death was not in vain, and he died with honor, doing what he loved, making money and hunting down criminals. But now the question remains, where do we go from here? What do we do next? Well, my friends, I think that we have found some steady work, a full-time gig with a new employer. Well, 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 look who we have here. It's good to see you again. You'll have to forgive us. I know it's been a minute, but Legs and I here were in hypersleep for quite a while. We've been traveling to a new star system in search of a very specific planet, but we're not alone. Our new employer, the Emperor Napoleon, has sent one of his Imperial Marines with us, going by the name of Ryan. Word has it he only recently got this position after he apparently saved some space marines or something like that, who knows. But it would seem that our entourage is going to be quite useful and critical for finding our target on this new planet, as they have a bit of a history. There's a space pirate king by the name of Udo, the leader of the torturous marauders, and we think that we've pinned his location to this icy planet in the outer rim of the galaxy, frozen and uninhabitable, or at least you would think so. With as cold as it is here, something tells me that that liquid ocean isn't water. It's likely liquid hydrogen, and that would explain as to why the marauders have created something of a small outpost here on this planet, with even a few towns and cities popping up sparsely throughout its cold surface. Strangely, in the northern part of the planet, farther away from the towns and cities and other outposts, we were detecting two small anomalies. Most likely other settlements. One of them even had the basic signals from the torturous marauders, but the other not so much. Strange. Nevertheless, we plan on landing right next to one of these hydrogen depots where they're sucking it all up to make rocket fuel and whatever else they need it for. A very small outpost for refining. Perhaps it's actually for military purposes, and the towns that they're forming are for the refining. Nevertheless, no doubt this is probably one of their most protected places on this teeny tiny planet. They don't seem to have much in terms of automated defenses, although it seems that the pirates themselves are carrying some pretty powerful weaponry. Not to worry though, careful is our middle names. That's a whole lot of middle names too. We were on our way down, as careful as we could be, and immediately after landing we started opening fire with our lasers and our uranium turrets. Legs would rush to his precious mech to take this fight to those damn pirates. A good majority of them were killed in the initial attack against their base, making it a bit easier for us, but this still was not going to be any cakewalk. They quickly surrounded Legs in his mech, who couldn't come out of fear that the pirates might make it inside and damage our critical infrastructure. Thankfully though, with Orzo and Ryan giving some good cover fire, Legs could finally make his way outside to begin attacking them. Now, taking the mech behind the pirates on their flank, we could easily take them out as we were attacking them from both sides. And those few who had made it inside were promptly executed. We immediately began attempting to extinguish all the fires that had been set before our electronics burst into flames. Outside, Legs had to ditch his mech as it was heavily damaged. Legs, old boy, looks like you could use an assist. We rushed out, but after Legs hit the ground from a plasma blast to the chest, we had to rush him inside to ensure that he didn't die. Now that Legs was taken into safety, Orzo would finally finish this. Well, it would seem that this poor excuse for a base is now in complete shambles. Wouldn't you say there, pirate? Well, I suppose Cat's got his tongue, huh? I don't think he'll be doing much talking ever again. Well, one thing is for sure, the Pirate King Udo is definitely not here, and none of his very injured pirates that are groveling in pools of their own blood know where he is either, or if they do, their face was burnt off and they can't say anything. But as Orzo begins looking for clues of the king's whereabouts, it looks like Legs isn't going to be bleeding out today, as long as Ryan continues patching him up. I think he's going to pull through, but I don't think the same could be said for his mech. Ah, such a shame. It really has served us well, and we've gotten more than enough use out of it. I suppose it is time that we let the old girl rest for a while, and we'll try to rebuild him one in the future. Besides, there's no time to dilly-dally, as we need to find this damn Udo still yet. Something tells me, though, if we stay in place long enough to dilly-dally, I suppose, he should end up rearing his ugly head. I mean, just take a look around. There's hardly enough towns and cities here that are depending on this base, no doubt, for them not to notice that it's been completely destroyed. If we wait here, surely we'll have a caravan or two arriving. And in the meantime, we can enjoy some of these pirates' fine meals. We just need to ensure there's no brain matter in them. Oh, looks like we might have missed one. Where are you going, you little scamp? We can't let you get away. Wait a minute. We probably could have asked her where Udo was. It would seem that Ryan's bloodlust has gotten the better of him, although you can hardly blame him as he was once a slave of the torturous marauders under Udo himself. And that's exactly why he is the perfect man for this job. Our internal bits and bobs of the ship were somewhat damaged from all the shooting and also from the fire that broke out, so we would need to spend a good bit of time while we're waiting repairing it. Even though this planet is very, very cold, for some reason this area seems to be quite warm. And that also means that these corpses will probably start rotting soon, so we need to get them away from us. And while we're at it, we might as well go about deconstructing many of their electronics, like their batteries and solar panels, for some extra steel and components. Things are always breaking down on the ship, and we always need components to fix it. We started deconstructing some other spots around this little base, like there's sandbags and things like that, just for some cloth and other resources that we might be able to sell. And this also keeps more pirates from using them as cover when they come back. Legs would also end up deconstructing his mech, that way we could salvage whatever useful components, such as a control module that it may have had left. These types of modules and items are crucial for rebuilding another. And now we just kind of wait. We are running around the town, checking out what the pirates were doing here, and also just trying to keep ourselves warm for the most part. This might be the easiest damn bounty hunt that we've ever been on, as we're just waiting for our target to come to us. It does appear that the reinforcements of the marauders will be arriving in about a day and a half. So, in the meantime, Legs, old boy, old buddy, old pal, would end up working on new parts for a brand new mech suit. It's a little bit difficult as we're currently scrounging for gold, and that's what we need for some of the modules, and it's been quite a while since we built one, so Legs might need to take another look at the old manual here. This also felt like as good a time as any to give Legs, well, his proper nickname of Legs, as, well, we've been calling him that since basically day one of meeting him. Finally, a day and a half had passed, and the torturous marauders had arrived, and well, it doesn't look like Udo is among these pirates either, unfortunately. Such a shame. We were hoping that we'd be able to kill him with just the push of a button. Oh well. Now that was a horrendous sight to behold. I'm sure those pirates that are fleeing might just go back and tell the old brass, and it might just get back to the Pirate King. Well, we're hoping for that. However, looks like we got a live one here. Maybe you have some information, friend. Ryan came out and began tending to the gentleman's wounds with a little bit of dirt and snow to ensure he didn't bleed to death on the way back to the ship, where we would throw him in the brig for the time being. As we were carrying him back, he had some faint mumblings about Udo and Archotech treasure, we think he said, but he's a bit too injured to really speak right now, so once he's healed up, we'll question him. Here's the thing, though. When Ryan came in to question him, he began to wonder, how would we know for a sheer fact that he's telling the truth? Well, there's only one way. Huh. Turns out he was telling the truth. Apparently, the Pirate King is on this planet searching for some type of ancient Archotech treasure and/or weapon that he plans on using to the benefit of the torturous marauders and their conquest across the galaxy. Thank you for your information, pirate. Now be gone. Ah, that's such a shame. He was such a nice guy. Well, at least we now know for an absolute fact that Udo is indeed on this planet somewhere. Hey, speaking of which, it looks like he's here. He's not here. It's just more of his foot soldiers. They appear to be wearing war caskets from what I can see. They might be a little bit more difficult than their comrades. For their sake, I sure hope so. Oh, look at that. It does appear that they're at least a little bit stronger. 3 of them ended up surviving our initial barrage from our ship, although 2 of them are severely injured. They kept on coming, which was pretty impressive until we killed 2 more of them, and the last remaining one decided to flee like a coward. But obviously, we couldn't just let him get away. Whereas previously, we let a few pirates escape to tell the others in hopes that the king would come. This time around, I don't think we're going to give them that leisure anymore. I really don't understand it. All this chaos, all these dead soldiers, these pirates, and yet no sign of him. I think we're going to need to kick things up a notch. Thankfully, by this point, Legs has managed to get all the components and resources that are required to go about building his mech once more, a Mark II version, of course. We would end up having to wait several hours before it was finally assembled, but once that was completed, we were back in action, baby, rockin' and rollin', ready to fight. But not only are we ready to fight, we are ready to take the fight to Udo. Since he's not coming here, I guess we're gonna have to go out and find him, huh? Up and away we go. There's only so many places that he could be hiding on a planet like this. What, there's a handful of cities, if that? He's bound to turn up somewhere. All we need to do is make a little bit of noise. The bastardous marauders would begin flooding into the streets trying to take us out, and of course this would completely fail. And at the end of the day, we were once again victorious, but still no sign of our target. Looks like we need to stir up a bit more commotion here in the city. If Udo isn't here, he's going to know that we were. I must say, one of the biggest perks of working under Emperor Napoleon is his interest, you could say, with nuclear and fusion warheads. I think our little green, yellow, and red friend here should get our point across pretty well to these pirates. Obviously, though, we don't want to be anywhere near this damn city when this thing goes off, so it's time for us to depart. Well, if he's not coming to us, he's not in the southern cities. There's only one other place that we could really check, I suppose. We hated to have to travel this far north, given all of the frigid temperatures. Even Leg's mech was beginning to freeze up at the joints up here, but it was a must. We would begin attacking these poor, dumb bastards. Now, I realize that Udo is most likely not here. At this point, we've begun to realize just in fact that he's not going to be at any of these bases, but he is definitely somewhere on this planet, and we intend to find out exactly where that is. It doesn't matter how many hordes of countless pirates we have to slaughter to get to him either. We would spill gallons upon gallons of their blood as they began to flee the area, or at least the ones that were somehow still walking could. As for those who were not, they weren't as lucky. I'm done trying to interrogate these idiots. It's time that we check something else. Perhaps some of the arrival and departure records here at the refinery, just keeping track of how much fuel is going where. While Orzo is checking out the logs, we would also have Legs here go ahead and begin destroying all the generators as well as the refineries. No more fuel for you, I'm afraid, pirates. Alright, let's see. I'll be damned. Looks like we just missed the bastard. And it would seem that he's went to this unknown area just a few clicks north from the refinery. Well, there's no point in wasting any time. Now that we finally pinpointed the Pirate King, we're going to be heading back south to retrieve our ship. God only knows who or what he could have with him there. We are going to need all the firepower that we can get. And I'm sure that Ryan is going to want to meet his old master as well. Gentlemen, we have finally located the target, and it is now finally time for us to strike. It finally ends here today, my friend. The Emperor's will shall be done, and justice shall be served. Flight positions, everyone, flight positions. We need to get back in orbit, batten down the hatches, and let's get up there. Obviously, being in orbit around the planet is going to be much more efficient than trying to fly this big old bastard through the atmosphere, but it would also allow us the ability to use our advanced sensors to spy on the area where Udo is. A barren, frozen wasteland, just like any other area on this planetary body. However, in the middle of these hills, there was a rectangular, square-like structure that appeared to have some type of Archotech runes and/or origin. The structure also appears to be protected by an advanced Archotech shield, so our ship's weapons will never get through that. We could, however, see multiple vehicles at one of the entrances of the structure itself. I'm guessing this is indeed where the target is, most likely with many a pirate soldier. However, one of the biggest issues that we began to face is the fact that this area is very mountainous, and our starship would not fit there at all. There's no way for us to land. The only way in is going to be taking the shuttle. This obviously isn't exactly ideal, as our heavy shuttle doesn't currently have any weapon capabilities other than us on the inside, of course, and we don't have enough time to upgrade it. Thankfully, the ship's AI, Charlene, is still aboard, obviously, and is going to be watching over things. So, if shit really hits the fan, maybe we could lead our enemies away from the Archotech shield and have our weapons firing down at the planet. But that is a bit risky still. Nevertheless, with the cover of darkness, we cautiously and slowly began to bring the shuttle down just outside the shield barrier. Now on the ground, approaching the entrance, we could see what we couldn't see with our sensors. The area was littered with the corpses of dead pirates. Unless they had some type of mutiny, something tells me that they were met with fierce resistance. We'd better find out for ourselves. It would seem that whatever this place is, it has its own Archotech automated defense force that almost look humanoid. We had no interest in this battle. Let them kill each other. We are simply here for the Pirate King, doing our best to ignore them all and continuing on our mission. There he was. We had finally spotted Udo rushing into a center room of the structure as we gave chase. As we finally pinned him down, he was interacting with some type of ancient console. We ordered him to stop and also to surrender, as we preferred to take him in alive for a bigger bounty so that the Emperor may torture him, obviously. But he simply continued, "Alright, you fool, have it your way. Open fire." Long gone are the days of peace for this galaxy. The return of the Archotechs has been foretold for millennia, and today it comes to fruition. Hey there, just wanted to pop in at the end of the video here, or if you're watching this in the future, the supercut of Season 3 of the Clone Army, and say thank you. Thank you ever so much for, well, watching the video and the entire season. I hope that you have enjoyed, and I hope you liked our ending, of course. I apologize if you are watching this in the supercut, that might not make sense, but it's been a while since I made a video in the Clone Army universe as well as the Space Bounty Hunter universe, because of course they're taking place in the same universe, and yeah, I just didn't really know how to really feel things out, and you know, I kind of lost some motivation there for a little while, and you know, it's always good to take a step back from projects and kind of look at them from another point of view and try to brainstorm ideas and stuff like that. So that's why this video took so long to come out, about 2 months almost from the last episode. So I do do apologize, and once again, if you're watching this in the supercut, none of this means anything to you, and you're watching it all at the same time. So that's cool, and congratulations. But thank you guys, again, ever so much for watching. Thank you, as always, for supporting and giving suggestions for mods and your ideas in general for the series. It really helps out more than you know, and as I always say, it makes the series not only my series, but our series, and I just really appreciate it, and I love you guys. None of this would be possible without you guys, so just, you guys are awesome. Big thank you to, well, you. But I hope you've enjoyed once more, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.